is 5:30 p.m., and I call to order the September 17th, 2024 Board of Trustees meeting. Do I hear a motion to enter executive session?
Madam Chair, I move that we enter into executive session to discuss employment recommendations and updates and to review the 2024-2025 homeschool applications.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. We will now enter into executive session.
first day at the first time a school opens its doors, and just to see the smile on the children's faces and the parents and the excitement, and it's just pure magic.
This first day of school is so special, just opening a school and being able to be a part of the history of this school and something that's a once in a lifetime for Southlake. It's just a really cool opportunity, and it's something that, you know, this group of teachers and this group of kids will always have and will always share, and it's something that, you know, we can always say we were here for that. We were here for that first day at Southlake Elementary.
In your mind, you visualize what the first day is going to be like. You visualize what the hall is going to look like for students. I mean, we have practiced how to navigate all the different places in our school without kids so that we were successful on the first day. And so to see it come into fruition and see all the students, like, you know, come into the building and walk the hallways and be excited about all the different experiences that they're going to have here at Southlake, it warms your heart in the best of ways. And it makes you proud to be a public educator. Because, you know, we are our best because of our students. And so to me, the school became a school when those students entered into the building today, and that was the best part.
So we might come to the circle for our closing, and then I might say numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go and pack up as we're doing a read aloud or as we're talking.
When you kind of stop by the end of the night and you tuck your own kids in and you sit down for that minute, it's joy in knowing that you got all your kids home safely that day, because that's kind of one of the most stressful parts of the day is, are they getting home the way they're supposed to? It's just knowing that you have another 189 days that you get to spend with these kids and see how, and it's just kind of like another road of excitement to kind of get to see where you get to go with them.
In my entire career, I've never opened a brand new school. And so for me to be a part of this, you know, basically almost year-long process of not only watching the building being built, but now to see the fruition of it with students and families coming in has really been, it's really been a great, great, great dream to see everything kind of come together.
Hello, I'm Lexington County School District 1 Superintendent Jarita Postaway. We're here at our newest elementary school, Southlake Elementary, and we're excited to welcome Lexington 1 students, staff, and families back to another spectacular school year.
Hi, I'm Keith Price, and I am thrilled to join the Lexington 1 family as Superintendent-elect. Building upon Dr. Postlewaite's incredible leadership, we are committed to guiding all students to learn, grow, and excel.
Our schools officially open their doors on August 7th. We can't wait to see your smiling faces as you board the buses or step into our schools.
We are ready to see the amazing things that you will accomplish. Have a great school year at Lexington 1.
Ivy and I are here together at Southlake Elementary School. We wanted to wish everyone a happy first day of school, a happy new year, and to thank our staff, our students, parents, for all the work you've done to get students ready for a new school year. Additionally, we wanted to say to our community that we appreciate the support you give to Lexington One schools. You make us one of the premier districts in South Carolina. Happy New Year, everyone.
The time that my family received assistance from the LEAP emergency grant, I was employed as a math teacher at the alternative school for Lexington One. We had just had our first child, and she came 2 months early, and a coworker of mine applied for assistance for my family to help us out financially because my wife was unable to work at the time.
Seeing personally one of my students getting help has really changed my mindset. I mean, as a representative, I've always known it can not only help out teachers, but it can also help out families in need. And just seeing that switch in that child's personality from just coming to school, holding their head down really low, or coming in exhausted because they didn't know if they were going to have a home within the next month, has really opened up my eyes.
The Educational Foundation's LEAP Education Fund has had a long-standing commitment to literacy in Lexington One, funding over $160,000 in the last 7 years for Bucks for Books, supplying many of our classrooms with texts that they wouldn't otherwise have access to, and also our literacy training that we do each summer with teachers.
It has helped out the district in teachers and students and families in different ways, helping fund books for classrooms. That has got to be one of the biggest things that teachers are always striving to grow is a library. This foundation is helpful, and it has really gotten a lot of families out of difficult situations. And knowing that we have many teachers, faculty members, and administrators who want to help out says a lot about our district.
For 20 years, 18 years ago, helping my family, and then from the classroom side and even as an administrator, I've seen some of our teachers put in for educational assistance for different programs, and some of our families, something hits like a house burning, or things that you don't expect. And I've seen the LEAP Foundation step up and help in all those situations. So it's been great to see from an outside standpoint.
Cheers to 20 years of the Educational Foundation's LEAP program serving Lexington District 1.
doing today?
It's absolute magic to be here at Southlake Elementary, and you know, how amazing to say you're a part of being the first day at the first time a school opens its doors, and just to see the smile on the children's faces and the parents and the excitement, and it's just pure magic.
This first day of school is so special. Just opening a school and being able to be a part of the history of this school and something that's a once in a lifetime for Southlake. It's just a really cool opportunity, and it's something that, you know, this group of teachers and this group of kids will always have and will always share, and it's something that you know, we can always say we were here for that. We were here for that first day at Southlake Elementary.
And today, you all became part of the Blue Healer family, and we are so excited to have each and every one of you with us. In your mind, you visualize what the first day is going to be like. You visualize what the hall is going to look like for students. I mean, we have practiced how to navigate all the different places in our school without kids so that we were successful on the first day. And so to see it come into fruition and see all the students, like, you know, come into the building and walk the hallways and be excited about all the different experiences that they're going to have here at Southlake, it warms your heart in the best of ways, and it makes you proud to be a public educator.
Ms. Moore, are we ready? All right, we are back. Do I hear a motion to conclude executive session?
Madam Chair, I move that we conclude executive session.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. I call to order the September 17th, 2024 board meeting and public hearing. The district is in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act by notifying the media of the date, time, and place of the meeting. The district tapes the meeting for accuracy in preparing the minutes. I now yield the floor to Secretary Beth Shealy.
Madam Chair, fellow board members, staff, and guests, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda to include minutes of August 20, 2024 board meetings, student travel requests, new hire support staff report, 2020-2024 homeschool applications.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Is there any discussion? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve 8 certified staff recommendations for 2024-2025?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve 8 certified staff recommendations for 2024-2025.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Price, I thought the school year started. Y'all are still hiring teachers?
We are. We're excited to bring you a few of those names that we discussed last time that we were able to offer to some schools for some extra support. So
that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments, board? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. There are no other actions stemming from executive session. All right, we are moving quickly to honors and achievements. Remember to grab your copy of Proof Positive, the newsletter which highlights our honorees. It was on the sign-in table when you came in. It makes a great, something to put in your pocket, in your bag to read when you're waiting, in a doctor's office or whatever. But this is important information. We're glad to share this with you. Once we finish, we will give our honorees a chance to leave the meeting before we resume, but we welcome you to stay. Dr. Postlewaite and Dr. Price, will you please step out in front? We have several honorees tonight, so when you hear your name, come and stand with them as we tell you about them and their achievements. All right, we are starting tonight with some of our exceptional staff. Sarah Kelly, would you please come to the front? Carolina Spring Middle's Sarah Kelly has been named the 2024 South Carolina History Teacher of the Year by the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History. Wow, congratulations, Sarah. Established in 2004, this prestigious award recognizes exceptional elementary through high school teachers for their outstanding contributions to American history education. Kelly believes that school is a place for students to grow their interests, develop critical thinking skills, and grow into future-ready citizens through hands-on activities, analyzing diverse texts, exploring different sources, and engaging in creative projects. She received a $1,000 honorarium, a core archive of American history books, and educational materials curated by the Gilder Lehrman Institute. Additionally, she will be recognized at a local ceremony and join the esteemed group of 53 finalists contending for the 2024 National History Teacher of the Year Award. Congratulations, Sarah. know here in Lexington 1 that we have some talented student athletes, but we also have amazing coaches who lead our students to be confident and successful athletes. Tonight, we want to highlight a few outstanding coaches in Lexington 1 recently honored by the South Carolina Athletic Coaches Association. First, would Lexington High boys basketball coach Elliot Pope come forward? Coach Pope was named the 2023-24 South Carolina Athletic Coaches Association Boys Basketball Coach of the Year. Coach Pope has coached the Wildcats since 2019 and recently led Lexington to the 5A state championship. He showcases exceptional dedication and leadership. Congratulations, Coach Pope. River Bluff High's Roger Smith was also recognized. Is Roger here? Okay. I see now. It says Coach Smith could not be with us tonight, but we plan to honor him at the next board meeting. I should read ahead. All right. Next, White Knoll High's Nick Pelham. Please come forward. Coach Pelham was named the South Carolina Athletic Coaches Association Football Coach of the Year. In his 3 seasons with the Timberwolves, Coach Pelham led his team to a Class 5A lower state championship. Last year, White Knoll posted its first undefeated regular season in school history and finished with a program best 14-1 mark. Congratulations, Coach Pelham. In addition to our coaches being recognized, we also have 2 athletic trainers who received top honors from the South Carolina Athletic Trainers Association. First, we invite Zachary Richards from Papillion High School to come forward. Zachary was named the 2023-2024 Trainer of the Year from the South Carolina Athletic Trainers Association. He joined the Panthers in 2019 as the school's head athletic trainer, and he serves more than 500 athletes at Papillion High and Papillion Middle, providing event coverage and treatment sessions each day for Papillion athletes, including post-operative rehabilitation. Congratulations to you, Zachary, and thank you for helping our student athletes be safe and perform at their best. We also would like to recognize White Knoll High head athletic trainer Sheila Gordon, who couldn't be with us tonight. We will invite her back to our October meeting. Congratulations, Sheila. We turn now to recognize some of our outstanding schools in Lexington 1. Carolina Springs Middle, Gilbert High, and Papillion High received the 2023-24 Beta Club Schools of Distinction Award. Will those principals come forward? Down. This award recognizes these beta clubs' academic achievement, exemplary character, the demonstration of leadership, and service to others. Less than 25% of beta clubs across the nation have received this award. Each school received a congratulatory letter, digital badge, press release, and a National Beta School of Distinction banner to proudly display in their school. Representing Carolina Springs Middle, Principal Patrice Green, Assistant Principals William Estes and Tiffany Young-Williams, 8th grade teacher Susanna Tate, and Middle School Director of School Counseling Julie Long. Representing Gilbert High, Principal David Dixon, Beta Advisor Christina Bosserman, and representing Papillion High is Principal Sean Bishop. Congratulations, guys. Tonight, we also get to honor a few of my fellow board colleagues. Will Katie McCown, Chris Rice, and Beth Shealy please go to the front? These 3 board members have earned an outstanding achievement. They have all reached level 2 of the Boardmanship Institute in the South Carolina School Boards Association. Established in 1982, SCSBA's Boardmanship Institute offers a year-round training curriculum focused on leadership skills for board members on state and national educational issues. Board members are recognized for reaching each of 6 levels. Level 2 achievement rewards earn them a certificate and a silver pen. Congratulations to all 3 of you. noticed that there were no students recognized tonight, and that is why we are going to recognize basically a school full of students next month in October at our meeting, which is going to be at North Lake Community Learning Center. And so be sure to tune in for that as we honor our students' achievements. Thank you for joining us tonight in recognizing our staff and schools and our board members. We love sharing the great achievements in our district with you. We would also like to give a quick shout out to River Bluff High senior Blake Wilson. Is Blake here? He's not. Oh, he's playing basketball tonight. He is interning with our communications department this year. He designed the certificates and proof positive for tonight. Way to go, Blake. If you need to leave, we will give you a quick and quiet moment to do that now. All right, it is now time for our superintendent's report, and I will turn the microphone over to Dr. Postlewaite.
Thank you, Mrs. Green. And I would say very quickly that one of the reasons our board meetings have been so long last month and this month is because of all of the policy and legislative issues that have come our way since June. So this is a notebook that we keep updated, and we keep tabs on which of the things we've accomplished to date. So that's one of the things that's making our board meetings longer than usual. I'm going to turn the report over to Dr. Price, who's going to kick us off this evening with an overview of what we're presenting tonight vis-a-vis the strategic plan.
To keep us on track with our progress towards meeting our strategic plan goals. And just as a reminder, our mission statement is to guide all students to learn, grow, and excel. And we have three specific areas, three specific targets that we are aiming for in our strategic plan. Standard 1, Target 1, focuses on academic excellence. Standard 2 is on positive climate. And Standard 3 is on utilizing our resources effectively. So as you see the different items that are listed on the agenda, you will see the different numerical standards that they are attached to. That's to keep us on track with our work and aligned with our strategic plan. In tonight's agenda, you're going in the superintendent's report, you're going to see 3 items that are all related to the positive climate standard. There will be an update on our STAY interview patterns and plans. A State of the District addendum. We've gotten some updated results on our SC Ready and end of course assessments, so we're going to give you an update towards those goals. And then a presentation on Centegix, our safety platform that we're in the process of installing in all of our school campuses. In addition, other items on the agenda tonight. Tonight you will get to see an academic feature focusing on grades K through 2. And a presentation on our 8% bond budget approval items. And then finally, there are some additional items that are contained in your board brief that focus on an update on employee-centered benefits RFP, our STAY interview details in board brief for the upcoming year, and then an update on our technology plan and our attendance awareness incentives that we're focusing on throughout the year. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We're going to move now into the next slide. We saw last time, who's driving this? We saw last time, thank you, Daniel. We saw last time the South Carolina teacher results, and we put the slide back up there again just to remind ourselves that the concerns were resources, student discipline, the administrative support, including the district reputation, and insufficient planning time given the number of busy tasks that teachers are asked to complete. When our HR department did the STAY interview findings, year before last, they talked with educators in the 3rd year of teaching. Last year, they talked with educators in the 10th year of teaching. We see that these findings are both consistent between 3rd and 10th year teachers for the most part, and they're consistent with the state findings. We see that both 3rd and 10th year teachers really care about their relationships, the culture, the love of students. They both struggle with finding the work-life balance, balancing the workload with everything they have to do. The third column there, the third row, is also talking about navigating controversial issues. That was the year that we were dealing with a lawsuit and began to get some guidelines from the state about how to teach certain issues, along with navigating difficult student behaviors. And then for our first-year teachers, the financial stability is still a major concern, our early career teachers. So one of the things we're recommending tonight is a focus on the salary study. We think that that should be the primary priority of this year's budget. Dr. Price will head up that salary study working group. We'll have 3 teachers representing geographical areas and elementary, middle, high school with special ed represented, 3 principals, 3 support staff representatives, and again, across the geographic areas of our district, as well as 3 district leaders, and we're asking 2 board members to join. The responsibilities would be to use the appropriate comparators to conduct a market study and then make recommendations for those salaries that seem most out of kilter. To consider salary supplements for the really hard-to-fill positions, as is happening in several other districts across the state, and to try to bring their recommendations to the board in December or by January latest, so that these recommendations can be considered as the budget moves forward. The next thing I want to talk about is the electronic device proviso. This is a proviso that was reached in the last hours of the legislative session in a conference committee that included 3 House of Representative members and 3 Senate members. So this proviso is good through June 30 of 2025 and then may or may not be renewed. But there are 3 primary areas that we have been meeting with our various stakeholders to discuss. One is what access means, what personal electronic communication devices are, and what during the school day means. So the law goes on to define the devices for us, and then when we look at the state board policy, we realize that they've defined the instructional day as from the first period to the end of the instructional day, and devices should be powered off. So it's during the school day, not during the instructional day. The devices may be used if necessary, and that's built into IEPs, a medical plan or a 504 plan, or if a student is a volunteer firefighter with permission to use the phone. So the state board policy also indicates that the district will determine the consequences, the disciplinary consequences. So what we've been discussing, Clark Cooper and Matt McCormick have led that work for the district. They're here tonight if any board members want to talk with them afterwards. They've been discussing with the various advisory groups what those advisory groups would recommend when it comes to when the school day starts, so with first bell, but when it ends, and does it end if athletes are going on leaving a school at 2:45? Is that the end of the school day for them? So there are lots of little details that have to be worked out. The implementation date, of course, is January of 2025. So we will have a lot of details to present to the board. We've collected the feedback. Basically, everyone agrees that we need to have clear constraints. We need to be clear about what the policy says. We need to be consistent in enforcing it. And so we need to be very clear about the consequences and not put the implementation of this policy heavily on classroom teachers. Moving ahead then, we just wanted to look at what's upcoming for the board in the next month or so. Excuse me. Yes.
Would you like us to just wait till the end of your presentation for any questions?
I think that would be great because I have my timer set for 25 minutes. And that way it'll be on your time.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Go for it. Go for
Thank
it.
you. Looking ahead then, on October 8th, we'll meet as a board to do the superintendent's evaluation and also at that time the board's self-evaluation. And those items will be discussed a little later in the agenda. October 9th, board members are invited to attend a principals meeting where we'll really deeply dive into the data. We're seeing highlights tonight. Some of the data are still embargoed, so we can't release a lot of details tonight, but you're invited to that October 9th meeting. On October 22nd, you'll be meeting, as has been mentioned, at North Lake Community Learning Center. You'll have the first reading on electronic devices, and also that night, we will bring a recommendation from the town of Lexington to extend the timeline on the Corley Mill Community TIF. They don't want any changes in the agreement other than to extend the timeline. And then on November 19th, we're hoping the second reading of the electronic device policy is approved, because that leaves us just 3 weeks, if you count Thanksgiving week, to get the word out and make sure everyone is ready to implement the policy when they return for second semester. Looking now at where we were last year, these are the things that we hope to accomplish in last year's work plan. We wanted to approve the Lexington One graduate profile, the instructional elements, implement recommendations from the curriculum effectiveness audit, set key performance indicators for the district, and complete the 5-year strategic plan, at least at a high level, with the understanding that a lot of the details would be worked out by those who are responsible for implementing and building out the 5-year build out of the plan. So the big focus was on aligning the system. We want to talk just a minute tonight about what that looks like, because board members may be getting questions from teachers across the district about why they're being told to align their practice to certain curricula. This is where we'd like to get with our curriculum guidelines. This example is from York, Pennsylvania, but as you see, each of the subject areas is represented on a picture there. And if we wanted to look, for example, at English language arts, we would click on English language arts. The second click would take us to the grade level. I've chosen 5th grade there. The third click would take us to the 3 component parts of the English language arts standards, reading, word study, and writing. I've chosen reading. And then the final click would get us to the units of study for 5th grade reading, so we can see what we need to learn in 5th grade, what our 5th graders will be assessed on at the end of the year. Now, again, this example is from York, Pennsylvania, but it's what we're trying to build to. It takes 3 to 5 years to build this out, and some of our initial attempts are just that. They're initial attempts, so we'll have to iterate on this process to get things calibrated. All of our teachers were invited to express interest in participating in building out this summer some of the units that they're implementing this fall, but the communication didn't flow through all the schools to the teachers. And we do have schools where teachers are very puzzled about why they're being asked to do what, and they would really very much like an opportunity to provide input again. So there will be future iterations. We just wanted to make sure that everyone understands this is the beginning of a longer process to provide transparency in our core business as a district, so that parents can see exactly what's happening. And as you can see in the blue font there are further click downs that one could use. And of course, if you get what we want to teach, what we want students to know, understand, and be able to do correct, the next big piece of work we have to do is professional learning. So this is just an example of comments that a teacher made last week in OGAP mathematics. OGAP mathematics, I would say, is to mathematics what letters is to reading. It teaches the teacher how to analyze where a student's thinking is currently and what response is needed to help that child move forward. So we're really happy to see an elementary teacher say, "Thank you so much for allowing us to have OGAP," that stands for Ongoing Assessment Program Training. I'm so excited about teaching math now because I have a better understanding of the foundation kids need in order to be successful just after 2 days. So we will share the first semester's schedule for OGAP with the board subsequently, in case any of you want to visit those sessions. The early elementary sessions focus on additive reasoning. The upper elementary focuses on multiplicative reasoning, and middle school up through 9th grade focuses on proportionality, which is fractions, decimals, understanding ratio, and proportion. Finally, we get to the state of the district. I gave that report in June. We were missing some performance indicators, and tonight, Dr. Shane Phillips, who's Director of Assessment and Accountability, is going to give us some highlights from the data that we are permitted to release. Dr. Phillips?
Thank you, Dr. Postwaite, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Postwaite. Tonight I'm here to talk to you about the results of some of our state standardized test scores from the 23-24 school year. Let me begin by saying that from a testing standpoint, including our interim assessments and the scores I'm about to talk to you about tonight, Lexington One had a successful year. Our focus was on growth, and to that end, we saw good and sometimes remarkable growth in our SC Ready and end of course scores. Ooh, it works. Okay. There we go. Who's driving this thing? Okay. First, I'd like to highlight our growth in SC Ready. You'll recall that last year we had a particular focus on middle school growth and growth of schools with increased need. On SC Ready as a district and as a state, we held relatively steady in our ELA achievement compared to last year. However, we did see some growth in some of our schools. While over half our schools surpassed the state proficiency rate on the ELA portion of the test, half of our middle schools improved over their proficiency rate from 22-23 school year. In particular, 7th grade showed the most improvement. It's also important to note that 55% of our Title I schools improved their proficiency rates as well. In math, the growth was even more pronounced. Almost 3/4 of schools improved over last year in math, and an equal percentage of schools surpassed the state proficiency rate. Grades 4 and 7 showed the most growth over the same grades last year, and more than 80% of our Title I schools grew in math proficiency over 2023. Let's move on to end of course. What you see here is a 4-year trend in the end of course proficiency rate by subject. So as a reminder, proficiency on end of course is defined as scoring C or higher on the test. As you can see, across all subjects since 2021, there's been steady growth. I'd like to point out a few highlights of these end of course scores. In algebra, all of our high schools improved their proficiency rates over the 2022-23 school year. 5 schools across the district, including all middle and high schools, improved by more than 10 points. I'd like to specifically point out that Pelion Middle School improved their Algebra 1 proficiency rate by almost 21 points. Almost 70% of schools showed higher proficiency rates than the state. In biology, again, all of our high schools showed improved proficiency over the previous year. In 3 schools, Gilbert, Pelion, and River Bluff improved by more than 14 points, with Pelion High improving by almost 22 points. 60% of Lexington One schools surpassed state proficiency. All right, moving on to English 2, 80% of our schools improved their proficiency rate over the previous year, and 2 schools, Pelion and White Knoll High, improved by more than 6 points, with Pelion High improving by 11 points. As a district, Lexington One was recognized by the department for surpassing the state goal of 75% proficiency in English 2. In U.S. history, 80% of schools improved their proficiency over the previous year, and Gilbert High and Pelion High both increased by more than 6 points. 60% of Lexington One schools surpassed the state proficiency rate in U.S. history. And finally, relative to our internally established work plan goals, we met or exceeded 3 out of the 4 of our internal goals. In social studies, we fell a little short but showed improvement over the previous year. So we're very happy with these results from this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. I'd like to compliment Mary Gaskins and her team, all the principals, on that incredible year they had. We are not yet where we want to be, but the important thing is we're on the accelerated on-ramp and headed in the right direction after having to rebuild following COVID. So it feels really good to be back on track, and we credit Mary and her team with that work. Chris Ellisor is going to talk with us now about some of the security and safety measures we're taking. Mr. Ellisor is the Director of Safety and Emergency Services.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Postlewaite, Madam Chair, board members. I'm going to be very brief and very quick, so I apologize for that, but I will take some of your questions at the end. Active shooter training this year, we partnered with SLED, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, their active attack unit. We brought them in. They did an hour presentation with all employees. I then took them and did a strategics training and a standard response protocol training. We held about 13 trainings, training over 3,226 employees. I didn't get the numbers from last week because we did hold some additional bus driver training, so I'm still waiting on those numbers. So I know we did 4 more trainings with our bus drivers, which was an addition to what we had already done with them. Just a little more in depth for those folks. Additional trainings to be scheduled in the near future because we do have some employees that could not make that training, right? So we're trying to make those up. All schools are compliant, current with policy and law requirements related to school safety drills. So we performed all of our lockdown drills to point at this time and our monthly fire drills. We are also doing behavioral threat assessment trainings throughout the district. We've held 6 trainings over the summer involving administration, psychologists, and our counselors. Those all went great. We're going to a new online system for our B-Towns. That is not quite in place yet. It's been a bit of a headache, but we're working through all of that with the SC Ed plan and those things are all in place. So I'm going to jump. Uh-oh, you said go down. I didn't. I came back. Wait a minute. All right, down is not it. Help. This year I broke my team up. I have 3 members of my team, myself, Sean Spivey, Howard Cook. We split the schools up into regions. All of my principals know this, but I tried to make it to where they would have a go-to person at that campus from our team. It's worked pretty well, I think. I haven't heard any complaints, and we certainly get all of our phone calls and manage them as best we can. So if you don't hear from me, it's because I'm calling you back soon. But it's gone very well to split us up into regions, and I'm going to let you click and change because I'm going to mess something up. Talk briefly about the crisis alert system that we've gone to here in Lexington 1 or are going to. We are in the process of implementing Centegic's crisis alert system. I know a lot of you saw this in the news probably last week. So they took my thunder and my spotlight, but it's an amazing system. It's a button. I'm wearing it right now. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm wearing it with my ID currently, and so that's how we will wear this in Lexington 1. It empowers our teachers, our staff members to get to that. So a teacher could alert a principal to their classroom in a moment's notice. They can press that button. There's a certain way they do it to get attention to their classroom. Maybe there's something happening in that classroom they need help with. But they also can lock a school down in a moment's notice. And that's what's key for me, right, for the safety and emergency services side. So I'm not going to go into the detail of how that works necessarily, but I'm going to tell you that it works within seconds. And I would invite any of you, we are currently testing schools right now. In fact, we did 3 this afternoon. It's an ongoing process. It's very tedious because it is a system that not only we install strobes, but we integrate with other systems that are current. So there's a learning curve there for all of us. So we're working through that, but please, over the next 2 weeks, we will be at elementary schools and high schools and middle schools. If you would like to see it work, to my board members, just reach out to me. We will get you there, right? We usually start about 2:30 or so at one of the schools. We wait for everybody to leave before we start doing this. I think that's hit me again. Well, just real quick, so to give you a background on it, it does give a map. So when they press that button, it tells them where that teacher's at and exactly where they're at on that map is the red dot, right? Now, the cool part is it's also linking to 911. So a lot of people don't realize that, but if we go into a lockdown at a campus, it's linking to our law enforcement, fires, and EMS officials through dispatch. We've had several meetings with them, and they were happy to come on board and help us out with that. So we haven't seen one operate yet, but we're working through it. We're almost there, so just give us some time. I hope to have us operational as a whole district. If we're lucky, middle of October. I hope to give you a better answer, but that's kind of where we're at with this testing and realizing that we have 4 different PA systems across the district. Getting each one of those connect in, it's a task. So, what questions do you have for me? All right, great, thanks.
So this Centegic's, it ties into our school systems, and this, obviously these cards cost. Is there an annual service fee? I mean, do we pay a membership?
We're on a contract with that organization. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes. So it covers the cost of the cards and things of that nature, yes.
Okay. And that starts this school year?
Yes, ma'am. It's already started, the contract piece, yes, with the implementation.
And that's being paid through?
This year, this was a capital project that you approved last year on the 23B. So this year is funded through that capital money, and then the subscription cost will be a general fund item for subsequent years.
Okay. And this is more of a thought suggestion that an elementary parent shared with me that I wouldn't have thought because I have high school kids that have been in the district a while. But you mentioned, active shooting drills and things like that. It might be a good idea for our elementary principals to give at the beginning of the year, especially new parents, like, hey, just FYI, we do fire drills, we do bus evacuation drills, we do active shooter drills, because then a little kid could be in a classroom and hear, we need to be quiet and hide because someone bad could be in our school, can be a little traumatizing. So just might be a thought to share with our principals, to share with our elementary parents.
All right, thank you.
We're ready for questions. We had 1 minute per slide, and so we were really trying not to string out the board meeting. We know you have a lot to do tonight, but we didn't mean to rush you through without addressing questions. So this is the last slide in the deck. We wanted to recognize that today is Constitution Day, and 237 years ago, this great country and the opportunities we have today were made possible. And then there were some additional slides about attendance. We were focusing on attendance, but we're not going to go through those tonight. So, Mrs. Henson, you had a question?
I do have a couple. First, slide 3, number 4, you mentioned some of the findings for the South Carolina teachers, and number 4 talked about insufficient planning time. And I was just curious if there was a trend where a certain grade level, like elementary or middle or high, you were seeing more of these results. Like, in my head, I'm thinking that this feedback might come more from our elementary educators than, say, our middle or high school, but I might just be assuming that. Not that slide, sorry. Yeah, I might have a different slide. The one that says Focus on Teachers 2024. Go other direction.
The one from
that one, yes, number 4.
The state. Mrs. Price?
I can't speak to the data for the state in particular, but when we did the stay interview data for our particular teachers, we did find that in our elementary school setting. For the pocket that we surveyed, that definitely was a pattern for the elementary teachers, yes.
Okay. So then we're looking to see how we can help make that better. Has the 30 minutes of unencumbered time helped that? Or we don't know? We don't have data on that yet?
I don't have data on that per se yet. This year, we are also, we're trying to combine that with our 3rd year or 10th year. And this year, our goal is going to be to look at special education teachers as well, and to look at that piece in relationship to special education teachers, because we also know that is an issue for them as well. So kind of trying to think through, how do we tackle all of that with all of those groups of people. Again, looking at patterns across time and what does that look like, and how do we tackle that? Asking that salary study group as well. Yeah. Are there pieces, because with all those issues come money, right? Like if you're going to extend time, or so how do we begin to tackle those issues?
Okay. Yeah. My other thing was to the electronic devices, and I know you have a team who is digging into this. I just have a couple thoughts to share as y'all are preparing something to bring to us just from conversations I've had in the community. Thought number 1 is, as you're looking at the consequences for students who are not following the policy, just trying to keep those consequences from being things like lost instruction time, so in-school suspension, things like that, making the consequences not lose instruction time. And then, obviously, I'm sure you're taking these into consideration, but I'm going to say them anyways, just keeping things like our ESOL students in mind who use it as translating devices, certain schools that have unique schedules where students are all over the place, I don't even know how to address that. And medical conditions like students with diabetes that use it to track things. And I think that was all.
Thank you. And we are going to try our best to have whatever summary we can put together and make into a draft policy to you in time to share on October 8th, because we just do the beginning work. It's up to the board then to really create your policy. So that's really helpful feedback as Mr. McCormick in particular, along with Mr. Cooper, think about that policy.
And I'll piggyback off of the cell phone. As far as the disciplinary procedures, I would just like to see, and we'll talk obviously a lot more about this, just, that the student isn't, then sent to ISS or something like that. I think maybe taking the phone or something would be a better discipline action. The whole point is to keep the child in the classroom and paying closer attention to what they're learning. So I think taking the student out of the classroom kind of defeats the purpose. Just my thoughts.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I had two quick questions about the SC Ready and the EOC data. I noticed that when talking about ELA, SC Ready, talking about 52% of the schools surpass the state proficiency. And when you look at math, it's 72%. But then when you get to EOCs, it's switched in the sense that 80% meet proficiency. Any thoughts on what contributes to that switch between SC Ready and then EOC proficiency levels?
Or is that a new trend?
I don't know that it's a new trend, and I can't speak specifically to why that flip is. That's probably more of a instructional issue, and I don't know if Mary has. Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, that's right. So it's going into English 2. So, Mary, you want to address that?
So in algebra, they take it in algebra 1, but in English, they take the test in English 2. So they've had another year of a high school credit-bearing course when they take the English EOC.
Okay.
And this would probably be a good time to mention that this year the English language arts standards changed and the assessment will change. Next year the mathematics standards are changing and the assessment will change. So this year is the pilot test for the mathematics, the real test for English language arts. So we don't know that we have vertically aligned assessments. We don't know that South Carolina Ready is vertically aligned right up into the same skills a student would need to have in the English, in the end of course test, because our state makes their own assessments. And those two things, we call that vertical alignment, like a spine. We don't know that it's vertically aligned in terms of the tests measuring the same progression of skills. And then the second thing that's going to happen to us, we're not going to be able to compare longitudinally because the assessments change and the standards change. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons we like to use iReady, which is a nationally normed test, to really help us benchmark where our students are compared to the rest of the country. Is that fair, Dr. Phillips?
It is, yeah, and it helps us to more accurately measure that growth from one grade level to another and across the span of a single grade level.
One more question. I want to celebrate with all of us the progress that we've made moving forward, but also acknowledge that, like Dr. Postlewaite said, there's definitely still opportunity, and being at 50% is never a place that I think Lexington 1 is willing to stay. And it sounds like we've got a lot of work planned, particularly in the strategic plan and with aligning our curriculum, standardizing, and all of that. Do you expect that maybe over the next year, 2 years, we might see an increased trajectory upward of some of these test scores as a result of that?
So I'm going to reiterate something that I said in there, and that was that our focus for the entire last year and this current year is on growth. So we're really focusing on meeting kids where they are and pushing them forward. And just as the growth comes, it follows that the achievement will improve as well. But we have to make sure that we're meeting the needs of those kids who are at the lower end and pushing them up so that everybody gets the benefit of that growth. And it also incorporates that focus on growth, incorporates those higher level kids. And this is a good reason why iReady is a good tool for us, is we can focus on the specific needs of those kids, including those high level kids, and then grow them as well. Because very often what happens is the higher performing kids can stagnate. We have to keep pushing them as well so that growth is uniform across the system. So yes, I think if we continue the focus on growth, it's likely that our trajectory will increase.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, Dr. Postwaite, I'd just like to add a comment. I was pleased to see the improvement in SC Ready and your end of course exams. I know that is not where we want to be. I echo what Dr. Postwaite said. I know it's not exactly where we want to be. We want to continue to grow, but this represents a lot of hard work by our students, a lot of hard work by our teachers, and even the administrators, our frontline leaders in the building are encouraging and pushing teachers. And I just want to say thank you, because I know in this society it doesn't take much to watch the TV. Everybody is telling you, teachers, that you don't know what you're doing. Everybody wants to tell you how to do your job, even though they don't have any kind of educational background. And so pushing in the midst of this climate and this environment and achieving something and moving the needle forward, I think it's great. I think it's almost like a football game. We're at halftime now. We got the lead, but guess what? We want to keep the lead when it hits 0-0 at the end of the fourth quarter. So you've done a great job, but I just encourage you to keep up the good work and keep it moving forward.
Well, and I wanted to ask just a little bit about the one, I guess, still needs improvement, the social studies, and of course, and I'm just, have you explored why that might be lagging behind, Dr. Phillips?
What I will tell you, so we get very little information back from the end of course test as far as instructional needs. So one of the things we're working toward this year, and it is still a work in progress, but we are working toward it, is doing some common assessments in the end of course courses that are aligned to the blueprint of the state and to our scope and sequence, so that we can find those areas where we need to shore things up in the moment and not wait till after the end of course test is done when it's too late to do anything about it. So we're trying to be proactive along those lines. Again, given the very little information we get from the actual results of the end of course test, it's hard to say, what caused that. Hopefully we can find that out with these common assessments across those end of course courses.
Well, and I could be completely wrong, but just to me it seems like English and math, those assessments would be more skills-based, and the U.S. history end of course is content. And I could see that there might be less opportunity to go over multiple times, because I know in talking to U.S. history teachers, I mean, they're racing to get through the 60s before they have to sit the kids down for those tests. And I'm just wondering if the pacing, if that may be a part of it. I'm just curious, because I know that there's and every year we move forward, there's another year that they have to learn for the U.S. history test. And so there's just a lot of content. And I'm just curious if that is a part of the
That certainly could be part of it, and hopefully we'll learn more about that through these tests to try to figure out if our pacing is correct or if we need to adjust that. Historically speaking, social studies, the U.S. history test has been a very difficult end of course test across the state. It's not uncommon, but we're trying to find ways to shore up the instruction so that we get past the middle of that curve.
I mean, shoot, you could have a whole U.S. history test just on the last 5 years. So, I mean, there's just a lot of content there, and I just wondered if that is just more difficult to get across the finish line for the test. So, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Board, any other questions or comments for Dr. Postlewaite or the team? Anybody? Thank you very much, and thank you for always keeping your timer. and keeping to the time. All right, moving on to citizens' participation. Lexington County School District 1's Board of Trustees solicits the advice and counsel of its citizens. To encourage this participation, the board provides a citizens' participation period during our board meetings. If you are unable to attend this evening or are uncomfortable addressing the board in person, you may reach out to the board by email, telephone, or mail. Our contact information is available on the Lexington One website. As you came in tonight, you received a card to fill out if you indicated you wanted to speak. I will call on you by name and ask you to approach the lectern at the back of the room. We want to remind you that this meeting is being live streamed. You may comment on agenda items, school operations, policies, or programs. You may not speak about or name specific individuals, whether students or school or district staff. Failure to follow this rule will result in immediate loss of the opportunity to speak. The board will not reply to your remarks nor take any action during the board meeting in response to your comments or questions. You may address the board for up to 3 minutes. If you have any handouts for the board, please hand them to Ms. Halliday, who's standing up in the back, and she will distribute them to us. Please do not clap or make any comments, either while an individual speaks or after he or she finishes. All right, we have 2 speakers this evening. The first is Ms. Sarah DeVault, and she wants to speak about the dress code.
Good evening. My name is Sarah DeVault. I'm the mother of 2 daughters in Lexington One School District. I'm certain you're all aware of who I am at this point. Since the last time I was here, my daughter was dress coded again and left in tears, which required me to pick her up from school. It honestly comes at no shock at this point. It is evident to me that there is absolutely no regard for the students' emotional well-being by this district. We have school shootings that are not being discussed as much as a female student's short length. The fact that students are being called out of class for this rule, causing humiliation and embarrassment, is a complete waste of teacher resources and valuable learning time. This rule was changed in March of 23, marking the first time the dress code had changed in 20 years when a new superintendent was hired. There are so many more important things that should have been at the forefront for change, like student safety, teacher retention, over something like this. The rule is archaic and outdated. I am the parent. I am the one who should decide what is appropriate for my child, not a group of private citizens voted in by the community. I would never come into your home and tell you how to speak, dress, or act, and nor should you do the same. I will keep pushing for this rule to be changed back to advocate for all young women being judged for the clothing they wear by the people that have no place to do so. This year is 2024. Young women have so much facing them. Body shaming and clothing choices should not be something they are still dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mariel Taylor, and she wants to speak about the strategic plan.
Hello. So I think I'm going to take a little bit less time than I was originally planning because some of the questions I had have already been answered. So that's great. And it was great to hear some of the specifics to what the strategic plan has, like some of the action items that Dr. Price talked about, because that was what I was wanting to address. Were the specifics to the plan and the action items, because as you all are aware, I am one of the candidates running from school board, and I see several other candidates out here, which is great. But we were all asked on a survey from the district about how we could support the district plan, and there was no documents included with that, and so all I had to go off of was what was on the website, which included goals and just some strategies. And so I wasn't able to give a really informed answer about how to support that plan, except to say help develop it out further, which was talked about today. So that's great. But we did receive an email saying that the current state of the district plan was at the district office or at the Department of Education and was being reviewed. And so I did put in a FOIA request for the document because I did want to see if there were the specifics there. And when I received it, I did see that it was just a lot of vague action items. And so having the answer about the plan for this year to develop it out further, I just wanted to ask some questions about what that plan was going to look like and if that was going to be shared like on the website or out, to parents, how that development is going to take place this year, so that we can kind of keep up with what progress is being made to develop this out further. And so I will send that question to you all, and because I know you won't answer it here, but just to find out a little bit more about what that timeline looks like and how that will be developed, as well as who will be included in developing out these action items. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Postlewaite, would you mind taking just a minute to explain how the process works for the district to submit the strategic plan to the state, what that process looks like?
Yes, actually, Ms. Gaskins and her department do the detail on that. She probably can provide more specific information than I. I will just say that the district's plan has to be undone, unbundled, and put back into a different form that the state requires. They've required it for many years, maybe the early 2000s, and so we have to undo our plan and put it in their format. So I understand it didn't make a lot of sense. Mary?
Yes, so the plan approved, that's the state formatted plan that you all approved in April, gets submitted. And over the summer, we received feedback from the department based on that submission. And so we take the feedback, make some revisions. This year they were very minor, and we're still awaiting final approval from the department on that plan that's submitted, and then it will be made public. And we also, last year in the spring, outlined, according to each of those kind of indicators and the strategies, what we hope to have accomplished in 18 months, 12 months, 6 months, 3 months, which does provide more detail. And we've used that to articulate those smaller pieces of work that we will use to accomplish the goals in the plan, which is what Dr. Price alluded to at the beginning of the meeting tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Moving on to new business. It is time for the road show. Ms. Bazart and her team is back tonight. And tonight we get to hear about the mission in action from the kindergarten through second grade instructional services team.
Dr. Postwaite, Dr. Price, members of the school board, SLT, thank you all so much for having us this evening. My name is Bryce Cockfield. I represent the crew at Meadow Glen Elementary. I thought there would be a picture up there. No picture. Am I going too fast? It's coming? All right. I really needed that.
Who's driving?
I kind of needed that, brother. Help me out. All right. No, I'm kidding. So Meadow Glen Elementary, we are, this is the team that I get to represent. Sitting in front of me here, Michelle Brazel and Todd Wade, they're assistant principals there at Meadow Glen. This is our fabulous crew. We are located at, on Jenny Lane. We are at the intersection of Sunset Boulevard and I-20. We like to say that you can get to us from anywhere. And that's a statement of fact. If you look at the population of students that we serve students from literally all over the world, 21 different languages represented when we opened the doors this morning. And all of those students come, in addition to a Mandarin immersion program, and all of those students come to us looking to develop literacy and numeracy skills that will carry them for the rest of their lives. Regardless of where they come from, we take our work very seriously. Our goal is to have our second graders, when our kindergartners get to the end of second grade, we'd like to see at least 85% of them with the literacy and numeracy skills that they're going to need to carry them through school. As a former middle school principal, I know that students seem to enjoy school a lot more if they have the skills to keep up with what's going on in class. So we believe that English 2 EOC that you were referring to a few minutes ago, that we have a major responsibility in making sure those kids can carry that weight. Over the next few minutes, you're going to hear from a few minutes of our leadership team. You're going to hear Megan Segalis, he's our literacy coach. Amy Hooker is our math coach, and Hope Halfaker is our lead interventionist, and they're going to talk to you about a few of the strategies that are going to help us reach that audacious 85% goal, making sure all of our students can learn, grow, and excel as they go through our school system. Because really, regardless of where they come from, how old they are, what grade they're in, what corner of the globe they come from, they're counting on us to do a job, and we take that work very seriously. And Dr. Postwaite asked a couple months ago, how are the children? And so our team knows that we want to be able to respond confidently when we say all the children are well. And I want to turn it over at this point to Megan Segalis, our literacy coach.
Good evening. I'm Megan Segalis, the literacy coach at Meadow Glen Elementary School. At Meadow Glen, we have a goal for students to be able to learn, grow, and excel. We do this through collaboration, professional learning, and student-focused instruction. As a staff, we are focusing on the foundational skills that are a part of the new state standards. In order to support teachers in their work with the new standards and better serve our students, kindergarten through third grade teachers, multi-language teachers, myself included, interventionists, and administrators are participating in a South Carolina early literacy initiative. This whole team approach helps us enable to build a strong foundational literacy skills for all students at our school. In kindergarten through second grade, our classes are focused on instruction in phonics and phonemic awareness. If you were to walk into a kindergarten through second grade classroom, you may see teachers modeling, small group instruction, independent work, students collaborating, and literacy learning centers. As a part of all of these activities that you may see, classrooms have been equipped with phonics manipulative toolkits, and you'll see in the pictures them in use. Classrooms have the toolkits to be able to practice those foundational skills. In the toolkits, there's magnetic letters, letter trays, dry erase boards, and markers for independent practice, but also, as you can see in the pictures, small group instruction. The small group that happens in our school is data-driven by multiple data points, and the goal is to extend or enhance student learning during that instruction time. This year, teachers have already noticed, especially like first grade and second grade, the impact that our work has made on those foundational skills, because the students coming to them this year are really set up for success. So we are very proud of the work and all the collaboration that we do, and we're excited to continue to see our students learn, grow, and excel in literacy.
Good evening. So I'm Amy Hooker. I'm the math coach at Meadow Glen Elementary School. And just as we're working to build foundational literacy with our students in K through 2, we're also working very hard to build numeracy in our students. And our goal is to produce learners who are truly reasoning with numeracy to build a strong foundation for all their future learning. We're providing students with learning experiences that are grounded in concrete and hands-on learning activities that are built around these counting principles and reasoning. So how do we do that? Well, our teachers are participating in ongoing intensive professional learning provided through the district that Madam Postlethwaite spoke to earlier. And this professional learning really digs into the instruction that promotes additive reasoning starting at kindergarten, and it builds as the students grow. So through this training, we're able to bring concrete and individualized learning directly into our classrooms. And within those classrooms, the district has also provided every kindergarten through third grade class the materials and lessons built around counting collections. And so these counting collections provide real hands-on and differentiated experiences with those counting principles and reasoning that I spoke to through small group instruction, learning stations, and task and share collaborative experiences so that students are not only learning from their teachers, but from each other as well. So we are very proud at Meadow Glen Elementary that that's what we're doing. We're all learning from each other. We're all hands-on, helping to build these students so that they have a strong foundation that will help them learn, grow, and excel as they go through the years.
Hello, I'm Hope Baker. I'm the lead interventionist at Meadow Glen Elementary, and I get to compliment these two wonderful women as the person who comes alongside of the striving learners. And so my mighty team of three is what we call each other. We help serve children who are just not moving like they should and growing like they should. And so a few years ago, we've kind of phased out from a K through 5 intervention model to a K through really 3 because of the Read to Succeed law in 3rd grade. And so over time, what we noticed, I told my team, I said, we're going to try this and see what happens and track the data. And if it doesn't look great, then we'll go back. But what we have noticed is when we get in earlier with those students, we're able to fill the gaps much quicker. And in long-term success, when we can get in early and give those really solid foundational skills, we won't have students who are struggling when they go into middle school, as Dr. Cockfield was talking about, and they don't like learning as much. So my team, we do support K through 5, but just in a little bit of a different way. So K through 2 students and some 3rd graders that have been identified for Read to Succeed, they work with our team. So we have small groups. We also have some one-on-one intervention models to help those really critical students that really need to make those massive gaps. So our small groups are small. We keep them to about 4 students each because research shows that the larger the group size for these types of learners, the more difficult it is to catch them up. So we keep our groups about 3 to 4 students, and we pull those students. And what we do is we complement what they're learning in the core, their core classroom. So we kind of give them the double dip. So they get what they need in the core, classroom, and then they come to us, and we have learned over time, some students just need more time. Some students just need it, talk to them in a different way. Some students need more practice. So that's what my team does, is helps identify those students and gives them what they need so then they can go back into the core classroom and be successful. So since we're not able to serve some of our 4th and 5th graders in this model, what we do is we actually go into the classrooms and help support those teachers. Because what we know is if we can teach those students how to scaffold instruction for these learners, it's not only going to help that small group of students they have, it's really going to help everybody in their classroom. Because all students we know are not going to be perfect in all areas. So we go in, we model intervention, different scaffolds that we might use with kids. We might model some instructional strategies. We have conversations with teams talking about what they could do in their unit to help address all the needs of their students. And so we have these ongoing conversations. And as you've heard, our team at Meadow Glen is experts at collaboration. And there is not a day that doesn't go by that the service providers, the ML teachers, the interventionists, the classroom teachers, administrators, and coaches are working together and talking about what can we do next for this child. The children are known by name. We address them and go through their individual learning to give them the very best instruction we can. So this is a little bit of a highlight of our early intervention. And we're excited this year to also be able to offer math. In the past, we've been really heavily focused on literacy. But this year, we're excited to do math. So I have been working with Ms. Hooker to help us design some really intentional math instruction. And then we also had the pleasure of going to the OGAP training last week, which was phenomenal. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity for that.
Okay, so you've heard all of the great work that is happening in kindergarten through 2nd grade at the awesome Meadow Glen Elementary School. Let's give them a hand. Now we're going to share some impact data about this K through 2 work that they just shared. So what does the research say? This really lifts off the page what they just spoke to. So we learned about the early childhood programming last month in the board meeting and how it establishes really a crucial foundation for continued educational development for children in kindergarten into 2nd grade. And so you've heard that here reiterated, literacy, intervention, and math.
So when we're thinking about students who were not able to participate in a Lexington 1 pre-kindergarten program, it is even more crucial that we really get the foundational work right in kindergarten through second grade, because it is vital to ensure their academic success. In fact, according to the National Research Council, academic success, as defined by high school graduation, can be predicted with reasonable accuracy by knowing someone's reading skill at the end of third grade. And so you often hear third grade, hence read to succeed, that was mentioned earlier. So a person who is a modestly skilled reader by that time, so by the end of third grade, is likely to graduate from high school. So again, and I think one of them spoke to that, the end of course, for example, in English 2, the work they're doing in K through 2 leads to that success later. Okay. All right, so what does the data say? And if you have any questions, Dr. Phillips is here to answer all of the questions about the data. So you will see represented on this slide that students showed steady growth in the areas of phonics and phonemic awareness from kindergarten to first grade between the 2022-2023 school year and the 2023-24 school year. You'll notice there are slight drops between the spring and fall administration, which does speak to some summer learning loss between those years, and that does happen. And this is based on the iReady formative assessment that Dr. Phillips spoke to earlier. Okay. Next, we have shown here you'll see a slight drop in the percentage of students performing mid-grade level or above in the spring of first grade compared to the spring of second grade in phonics. However, in phonemic awareness, students increased substantially year over year from kindergarten to first grade and from first grade to second grade. And that really speaks to the work that Megan spoke to that's happening in kindergarten through second grade as in regards to phonemic awareness instruction. You'll see over 93% of students in the 2024 second grade class tested out of the phonemic awareness portion of the test. Okay, so good news there. All right, now on to questions.
Ms. Halfaker, you said y'all have switched more to a K through 2 or 3 focus, and then in 4th and 5th grade, you're doing more of, I don't know if you use this term, but a push-in model with your students. How long have y'all been doing that?
So we started phasing from a K through 5 model to where we are now about 2 years ago. And so we've been tracking the data, and as you can see, the data is showing that it's working as, we're getting in earlier rather than later.
And then do you push into all of the 4th and 5th grade classrooms?
So really it's based on need, according to looking at data. That's one of the, my jobs is to look at the school data and make those informed decisions. And then we also have teachers that come to us on a regular basis and say, hey, I'm really stuck on how to help this child. Can you help me? And so a lot of times we'll go in, we might observe the child, give them some feedback on that, and then we'll give them some instructional strategies to use.
So if we're seeing progress with them, Ms. Gaskins, is this kind of a pilot at Meadow Glen that we might implement at other elementary schools, or are we already doing that?
We have 5 schools this year that we're trying early intensive intervention in math. We've been doing that in literacy, but really making sure that we have that in place in math as well, which does have implications for 4th and 5th grade in terms of those interventions being offered instead by the classroom teacher.
Any other questions?
I have one. Ms. Halfaker, I have a question for you.
Oh,
okay. Sorry. You all mentioned words like collaboration and hands-on, so I was just curious. I hate to put you on the spot, but I am curious what your opinion or feeling is on devices, especially with K through 2nd or 3rd grade, and do you use them or not? And if you do, how much?
Okay, I can speak to that. So our students have devices in their classrooms, but they do not bring them with them to intervention. We truly believe these striving learners really need that, adult interaction to help model things, help kind of watch them to see what area are they, do they have confusions? Because that's when we can really step in and say, hey, let's stop right here and let me go ahead and fix this. I do believe devices are a tool, but I don't believe they have a place right now in intervention. They might eventually, but for right now, we're going to do everything we can to be face-to-face with our students.
Thank you.
Okay. Board, anything else? All right. Thank you very much. Y'all are doing good work.
Great thing.
All right, moving on to item 10.2, which is the first reading of policy KBE, support organizations. And I believe Ms. Roof is going to lead this conversation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members, Dr. Postlewaite and Dr. Price. Actually, Chair Green asked administration to bring forward for the board's consideration and review an updated policy dealing with related to school support organizations. This action was recommended in the South Carolina School Board Association's annual policy and legislative update publication. I believe that was the notebook that Dr. Postlewaite held up earlier this evening. As a result of laws that were passed this past spring in early 2024. The laws prohibit anyone convicted of or who have pled guilty or no contest to financial crimes from serving as financial officer of school support organizations. Also requires school support organizations to register annually with the school board. As noted at the top of the draft for the first reading of the policy, this update will call for the removal of policy LEC, which is our existing support organization policy, to be replaced with a modified version of policy KBE, which has been presented tonight for your review, analysis, and consideration. Our policy, current LEC, does also include an administrative rule. So what the plan for updating that is, after the policy is approved, we will bring back an updated administrative rule that can be based on the updated policy, and that we will bring for your consideration. I do want to just mention real quick, one of the things you'll see in the law is a reference about background checks. We do ask our schools to already, and this has been a practice that's been in place for a few years. I'm not sure exactly when, because I think it predates me coming back to Lexington 1, but a practice from asking the schools to have their officers of their support organizations to go through our volunteer screening background check. So that is something we've had in place for several years now. And so I will yield the floor to anyone who has questions, but it is there for your review, consideration, and review. I said review, so there, that's it, period. Exclamation point.
Or do you have any questions for Ms. Roof or about the policy or conversation about the,
out of curiosity, you mentioned the volunteer background, but is that the same thing as the policy states a criminal background, criminal records check, including fingerprints? It says the Board of Trustees may request.
It is not quite as involved or in depth as that. It's more than the check-in at the school. That's the scanning. But it is a criminal records, but not fingerprint. Okay. I needed to demonstrate that with my hands.
Board, I'm just curious. I feel like if we would do it for one school, we would do it for all. So does it need to be more specific, like we would or we do require this? Or is that just it needs to be in there in case there's a concern that's brought?
Are you talking about the fingerprints or just the background check?
Well, the criminal records check.
Well, because I know, this was several years ago when the district began doing that, probably 2016, any volunteer, because I was PTO president at Meadow Glen Middle at the time, and everybody that was on the school improvement council or the PTO at the beginning of the year had to fill out the background check form and sign it and submit it, and they sent it into the district, and they vetted everybody.
Well, I served on that wasn't the practice where I.
It was.
It might have. It might. It should have been. It might have been. But I'm just.
And in fact, I think even with like anybody that had to be a chaperone on a school trip, you had to submit that as well. So I don't know if that's still the practice.
That is, and I'm looking down the row because that part of
see,
this.
I pulled off my
I
whole
did.
microphone
I think
thing
you did
trying
it
to
on
answer the
purpose.
question. So yes,
I'm just saying whatever we do, it should be.
I know. This is all the things. So yes, they should be submitting those for volunteers, and it is required if they are going to handle. We ask them to do that if they're going to handle money in any form or fashion or way, or any officer, they should be submitting those to our office. I would say that the fine line there on the piece that Libby was speaking to, we are running, if they submit them to our office, we are running a criminal background check.
Okay.
The piece that I would say you would want to think really carefully about is if you are going to require the fingerprint piece, that is a whole different level that you probably would want to think really hard about. You know, the criminal background check is obviously very thorough. If they're submitting them, that is a very thorough background check. The criminal, if you're going to require a fingerprint piece, you're going to have to figure out how are you going to get them into a building to take their fingerprints, and that's very expensive as even, you know.
And I think to address maybe Mrs. Henson's concern, or maybe the difference in our experience, is that we need to make sure as this is implemented that just what the practice has been is being implemented at all the schools and all organizations, and not just that compliance is 100% with what we already have.
And I will say that in our training that every employee has to review, and we have this lovely employee handbook video that we all watch.
A lovely speaker. He does a great job.
And she reminds us of that requirement of every employee. So I can't speak for previous, but I do think we've made a really strong effort to remind not just our administrators, but that's really something that every employee hears, so that we can help make sure we catch those volunteers at the beginning. You know, because it is a turnover, and so it is. We have turnover in the leaders of our school. We have turnovers in our volunteers. So just making sure everybody remembers that process every year.
I know I would receive the form to chaperone a school trip from the teacher, and I was on the board at the time, and they're like, you have to fill this out. And so I mean, I know that there are some schools that are very diligent
they do that for
about
field trip.
it.
We had to do that for field trip.
Checking compliance on that's a little bit harder. You know, I can check compliance of an employee because I know you work here. I can check if you have a background check or not. I don't know if you volunteer, so it's hard for me to check compliance of that because I am trusting that as a school, you are telling me who the volunteers are and you are reporting them and you are running them through the process. So I can't, if I don't know you exist, I can't check to follow up on that. So it's a little bit more difficult to ensure compliance with that. But to your point, we have to make sure that we put that rule out there and that we are asking everyone to follow that.
What's our identification process for volunteers? Do we issue name badges for them, or they just get a temporary sticker when they come in the door? Or
correct, yes. We sign in through our Raptor system when they come in the door, and they get a badge.
And this policy is really looking at all volunteers are very important, but these are like the leaders in these parent organizations, support organizations. And they handle a lot of money. And I think that was the concern that the legislature had in enacting this proviso, was that you just keep seeing instances of abuse of funds by officers of booster clubs and things. And I think they were trying to crack down on that and give some teeth to local districts and boards to
go back to what you said earlier, I mean, we need to assure that consistency is across the board. It is the same at every location.
And Mr. Anderson, to clarify too, a visitor would be signing in when they come in the door. A volunteer, there's a difference between a visitor and a volunteer. Okay. So if I'm going to just visit, I'm going to lunch or something like that, I'm checking in at the front counter. If I'm going to volunteer to go on a field trip, that is a process. I'm filling out a form, I'm going through a background check. Those are two different scenarios too. Am I going to be alone with children? Am I not there? So there are some different qualifications for things, just like am I going to be an officer in a organization? So we do have guidelines for different kind of levels of what you're going to do as well.
And volunteer is a broad term because we also have, the parents that come in and they help in the the workroom or, whatever, and just needs to be some consistency across the board.
Correct. And we have kind of guidelines that define that and are, explain what the differences are and all those things.
So then for that first sentence in the third paragraph, should we keep it as recommended? Upon the receipt of a Booster Club's registration, the Board of Trustees may request a state criminal records check, including fingerprints of the financial officer from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. Should we include the including fingerprints portion or take that out?
My thought is, if we're doing the criminal background check already, then we're already doing it. Maybe we need to state it that way. It's not to the discretion of the board because it's already being done. So I think we could propose some edits for second reading.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Ms. Shealy. And then the other thing to this policy, Ms. Freeman, close your ears. There's some Latin words in there that really mean no contest. And so could we just, Ms. Roof, when you read it, you actually said,
no contest.
Pled guilty or no contest. So could that be?
Because I was not going to try to pronounce that in my Southern accent.
So can we just say that?
No contest. Yes, I wasn't going to.
Okay. That's fine, Ms. Freeman.
This is our Latin teacher in residency over here.
Okay, I will be okay with that then.
All right. Any other questions or comments about this policy?
I have a question on page 2 of the policy as it's written, the second paragraph. It says support organizations desiring to use the name of the district or a school to organize, fundraise, or advertise must obtain the approval of the superintendent/principal or his/her designee. So I guess the question on that is it the superintendent, principal? Who has to give them that approval? The way it reads now, I think maybe what they were trying to say is if you want to use the name of the district, you need the superintendent's permission, but if you want to use the name of the school, you have to get the principal's permission or their designee, but it's not really clear the way it's written.
I agree with you.
Okay. So we just need to do some edits there.
I wondered too, what do they mean by designee? I mean,
like the athletic director maybe for using it.
Yeah, but I would like that to be a little bit more specific.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on this? All right. Thank you. Again, this is first reading. If you have any other thoughts or suggestions, just send them to Ms. Roof, and we'll get those incorporated. All right. Ms. Miller, first reading of policy DM, cash in schools.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Chairwoman, Mrs. Green, board members, Superintendent Dr. Postleway, and Superintendent-elect Dr. Price. We have policy DM, cash in buildings, being presented for first reading this evening. It is a much shorter, brief policy. This is based off of the model policy, and just to give you a quick summary, cash must be deposited on a daily basis. Do not leave cash unattended. Turn in cash to the principal or executive secretary no later than the end of the day. Do not make disbursements out of the cash received. Everything has to be reported properly with accounting. And then lastly, failure to make any timely deposits may result in disciplinary action. Any questions?
Just one question is school plays. Athletics, those are usually taking place in the evenings. So that really would be very challenging to make day of deposits. So are there exceptions for those things?
We have a process for nightly deposits in a Dropbox that have been communicated with athletics and schools, and that is the process for evening deposits.
And so for things like athletics, You show up to a game, you can't show up with an empty cash box because the first person that walks up has a $20 bill and they're paying $5.
Right.
So is there any exception for that, or do the athletic people have to go to the bank for every game to get cash?
We are utilizing an online system majority for payments for athletic events, but we do accept cash. The schools can request a check to get their money the day of to have the cash, and then they deposit the money as well.
Seems like a lot of work.
I have one concern here. It says that the principal may make arrangements for the local banks for night depository privileges. That's 32 people making that decision.
We probably need to change that wording. We have that relationship with First Community to make the night deposit.
And this is specifically school cash, because like I'm thinking PTO hat. If I do a fundraiser, I'm going to have a box of money sitting in the office for a couple weeks while the cookie dough sales are coming in and things like that. This policy does not apply to the support organizations and their cash.
We can't tell another entity that's a legally separate entity what to do with their cash. That it would be their board's decision on that, and we keep the district funds completely separate from a support organization's funds.
And I just was curious about cash. Would this policy be a good place to put in about all schools being required to accept cash? Because I know that was, in the last couple of years, has been a big issue, especially at after our, sporting events or, I don't know.
When plays come without the smartphone to
right.
scan the
And
QR
it's
code.
mostly, your older folks who show up and they don't know how to work. And then, they're told, sorry, we don't accept cash. But so is that something that we could put in here that would?
We certainly can take that into consideration, and I do know that we have communicated to all schools that they must accept cash.
I wouldn't mind having that. Just
I think that in there a state law that
It's a law,
requires that.
correct.
Yeah.
It's a law.
It is a law, but a lot of people we're still denying people cash. Yeah.
That sounds like an enforcement issue as opposed to needing to create redundancy by putting it in a policy. So maybe there's another way to skin that cat. Maybe I shouldn't have thought about cats. Sorry.
All right. Any other questions or suggestions for Ms. Miller on this? And again, this is first reading. If you have anything or language suggestions, send those to her and she will incorporate them. All right. Ms. Gaskins, it's your turn. The first reading of the IJ policies.
Thank you. We have 5 IJ policies we're going to discuss tonight. I've mentioned before that a subcommittee of the Teacher Leadership Council has been looking at all of the I policies and has prioritized those for revision. So I have a few more in line after these. We did wait to bring these until the instructional materials regulation passed so that we could make sure that these were in compliance, and so we've made some further revisions to ensure that. So the first policy, IJ, was a little bit confusing, and it's before we made some revisions. It introduced instructional materials, but then the remainder of the policy was about students taking surveys and parents being able to preview those surveys. And so that policy now just focuses on surveys and is in compliance with the Protection of People Rights Amendment. We recommend that we remove the exhibit to IJ, IJE. Every year, our communications department notifies parents as part of our annual notifications of PPRA, so we already have that in place and don't feel like we need that exhibit. Anything that was related to instructional materials in IJ has now been moved to IJJ, which now just focuses on the selection, adoption, and inspection of instructional materials. Again, we've incorporated the language from the instructional materials regulation in addition to the revisions that our teacher group made. IJL is specific to the selection of library materials, also has been revised to be in compliance with the reg. IJK addresses supplemental materials that we feel like we have addressed in IJJ, and so also feel like that can be removed.
Does anyone have any questions? Or?
Just so in summary, IJE and IJK for deletion.
Yes.
Which, I mean, IJK talks about videotapes and newspapers and CD-ROMs and film strips.
Microfiche.
So. Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
IJ, let's see. They're all running together, sorry. In IJL, can you speak to where it says professionally prepared selection aids such as but not limited to school library journal, the horn book, or the bulletin of the Center for Children's Books? Why those specifically, I guess?
So those are resources that librarians use. They are professional resources that are known to be supportive of librarians, and those are the same ones that are in the model policy for the state, and also a number of other districts are using.
Okay. And then I had someone ask about curriculum and instructional materials, how that is based on, the will of the board, but I don't necessarily remember going through each curriculum, and approving or not approving what our kids are learning from. So can you speak to that?
Yes. So what does come to the board each year are any newly adopted textbooks, so those that have been recommended by the State Board of Education. And so we bring those materials each year to the board for adoption. So those are the resources that we pull from as curriculum is designed.
So anything previously that we've used and are still using may not have come to this board?
It could have come to a formal board, yes. So for example, the English language arts text that you approved this past April, we hadn't had an adoption for 12 years. So that would have been several boards ago that approved those materials.
And that was based off of the new standards?
Yes. It's the adoption and funding cycle too, the funds that are available when materials come up for adoption.
Okay.
At the state level.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments about the IJ policies? All right. Moving on to 10.5, and this is what Dr. Postlewaite mentioned in her superintendent update, and the salary study team that is going to be put together with various folks, leaders from different parts of the district. And as board chair, our policies authorize me to appoint board members to committees, and I have talked with and asked Ms. Henson and Ms. Shealy to serve on the salary study committee. I think they are the very appropriate board members to represent us on that committee. I know Ms. Henson is a former classroom teacher, and also she's a math teacher, and she gets the math piece of it, and she's done a lot of number crunching on the salary scale already, has really dove headfirst into it, and so I think she's appropriate. And then Ms. Shealy and her business background and vast understanding of the business world and just what the world looks like as far as what salaries are appropriate for folks right now. So I appreciate them being willing to serve on that committee. And then now moving on to preparation for the October 8th, 2024 annual board assessment and the superintendent evaluation. And I'll just mention that I have talked to Kathy Mahoney, who is our attorney that assists with the board, the superintendent evaluation. And I believe that she's already had some conversations with Dr. Postlewaite as well. And that is going to look like it did last year. That was a great format that we used last year. As you know, we have that superintendent evaluation instrument that was created several years ago, and the board should just use that as a guiding document as you consider. I know Dr. Postlethwaite has been very diligent and transparent in sharing KPIs throughout the year. That's something that we get at every meeting. And so just the data and the information that's been shared with us throughout the year, use that as you read through that superintendent evaluation document to just kind of inform your thoughts. And we will conduct that evaluation during open session on October 8th. And then the board self-assessment this year is going to have two parts. And we actually established and voted on board goals that are up here at our January meeting that are kind of the spirit of these goals are part of the strategic plan that was approved in February. And so we will just have a brief discussion of these board goals that we set, and just kind of, it's not been, but a few months since we approved these, but kind of just measure ourselves against, our board against these goals. And then also we are conducting a 360-degree review of the board with the assistance of our principals and senior leaders. And that group will receive a 10-question survey that for them to evaluate the board using the 10 criteria on the profile of a Lexington 1 graduate. And so it's just going to be kind of a chance for the board to see through the lens of our school leaders how the board is modeling the profile of the Lexington 1 graduate. So I think that'll be a good exercise for us as well. So that'll also happen on the 8th. And to facilitate the board self-evaluation, Dr. James Ann Shealy is going to be here to facilitate that with us. She's a former principal, a former senior leadership member in our district as well as other districts. She knows Lexington 1 well, and she knows our board. And so and she's just very professional and calm and quiet, and I think is really looking forward to just helping guide our conversation that evening. So that should be a good and productive time for us to communicate to each other about how we work together as a board. And then finally, under new business is a discussion of board compensation. And I think I'll let Ms. Henson introduce this, and then we can all participate in a little bit of conversation.
So this is really to kind of just open the floor for us to talk about the work that we do on the board and the cost of that work. So I don't want to speak for all of you, but I feel very confident that when we all chose to run for school board and serve our community, we were doing that, unselfishly wanting to truly serve and give back to our community. And I think that we all still feel that way. I sat back and reflected recently, and as Ms. Green said, I'm kind of a number cruncher. So I just wrote out a few things and went back and looked through my calendar, and over a 6-month period, and this doesn't count conferences because we are reimbursed for our mileage to go to conferences because they're in Greenville or Charleston or things like that. But this is just local around our district. In a 6-month period, I traveled 727 miles. And that was because we were in schools or participating in district activities, which is really important because when we're in schools, we can see what's going on in our schools. So 727 miles. And then I added up hours, and these hours do not include phone calls, emails, texts, Facebook messages, studying material for board meetings, communicating with other board members. This literally just counts hours in a board meeting or at a school, and that came up to over 125 hours. And so, board, do you have any thoughts on not necessarily coming at this as a making money aspect, but more of a being made whole aspect in the sense of at least mileage. I know there are other things other considerations that people might have. So I guess thoughts.
And I'll just chime in. And anybody can find this on the School Board Association's website. They have a document that they've created of board compensation around the state. And Lexington 1 is one of, I think, maybe 14 or 18 boards around the state that receives no.
We have a document on that.
That receives no compensation at all. And the compensation varies greatly because local boards, they set that themselves. And it'll vary from, I believe Richland 1, their compensation is $50 for every meeting up to
Richland 1 has a $9,600 max, and it's $320 a meeting with a limit of 30 meetings per year.
So it varies a lot. And again, like Ms. Henson says, nobody runs for the board for the compensation because that's not why we do this. But it is, I think there is, because our district is large. We're 440 square miles. I know from my house to any of the Pillion schools is 26.4 miles. And there have been times where I've made the trip to Pillion 3 times in a week. And that's to and back. And so there is expense. I mean, and when I first got on the board, I had a child that couldn't stay at home by himself. And so I had to get a babysitter. And I know that we have board members who, for certain events, have had to take a day off, a day of personal leave at work to come and participate in board. So there are some actual costs that we incur being on the board that, it may be that it is time for, and the number of schools has grown, and so the number of things that we're involved in, and the meetings and the school activities, because you want to be a part of that, some sort of effort to make it so it doesn't, it's not a cost burden for board members to serve. Maybe it's not even enough to make them whole, but maybe go a little bit towards making sure that it is not a personal drain on their families to be a part of, to serve on our board, because we want good people to serve, and we want folks to be able to serve in a way that doesn't cause detriment to their families. So that's my thought.
There's 46 school districts in the state that do compensate their boards, and some of them pretty nicely. I don't think that what we have talked about leading up to tonight, I don't think that we're talking about a salary. We're talking about a stipend to offset our expenses, as you said, gas mileage, time. Yeah, it comes with it as far as I'm concerned, but it's worth a little something. It's time. It is time. I know in the past that I've heard others say that, well, you knew this going into it, and you can always say, well, we do this without pay, which I think is kind of crappy, to say the least. That's not a good thing to say. Like I said, you knew what you were getting into when you went into it. You knew it was without pay, but as you said, it's time.
I'm almost reluctant to speak with all of the board candidates in here, because if they knew exactly how much time you took away from your family and answering emails, reading through all of the plethora of policies that you have to do, knowing that you have to go to work the next day and you have to leave work early the next day so you can be at the board meeting the next day to answer questions and stay there all night and go back to work the next day. You will never come back. You cannot set a salary or a stipend to get you back right. You just won't. And that's not the reason that you ran. And I'm not trying to scare off any of the candidates, but hopefully you didn't run. Hopefully you ran for the right reason. I'm getting on my soapbox. I better stop. But it is something that you serve and you do, and I don't see anything wrong with some kind of a compensation. I know how our public is. I know there's a lot of questions about just what do we do with the finances, what's the fund balance, all of that. I know that. I already hear that. I can hear the people out there watching on YouTube right now. It's the Fox Garden, the hen house, and they're setting their own salary, and they're trying to set themselves up so they can get some of that money. That is not why we're sitting here, and that is not what we do. And I don't think any of our candidates who are running for that purpose. And if they are running for that purpose, I hope the voters figure it out. So I think compensation is a good thing. There's a lot that we do. I'm telling you, the more you talked about it, I started thinking, oh, my God, I didn't realize I was putting up that much time and that many miles. I mean, when I drive to Pillion now, when I go to the IGA, I can get the boiled when I get the boiled peanuts and the popcorn, Oreo popcorn, that's kind of worth it. But I'm kind of in favor of maybe possibly doing something. I think we need to be very, very cautious and very careful, because I don't want it to create a feeding frenzy where the wrong people in our community start running for this board for some kind of salary or some kind of stipend. And the only other thing I'll say that really was eye-opening to me this week was I talked to one of my state representatives, and they were talking to me about, well, you guys get on the board and you get the health benefits like in the state health benefits. And I said, no, we don't. And the representative said, are you serious? I didn't know that. I said, no, we don't get compensated anything for this role. No health benefits, no salary, no mileage, nothing. And they were like, oh, wow, that's odd. So I think we're like about the only elected office in the state that doesn't get compensated anything, no health benefits, nothing. So I think there's some fairness to considering that, but like I said, we just need to be cautious as we start that journey forward on how we do it, because I don't want this to draw the wrong people out of our community to start trying to sit in these seats.
I'll say what I say a lot these days to folks is that you don't know till you know. And I can honestly say that I thought I had a pretty good idea because Kathy and I are friends, and we would talk a lot before I even thought about running for the board. And I had no idea until I got here what the commitment time-wise was. I wouldn't take it back. I wouldn't trade it. I mean, it's been a really great experience, and I'm so glad to be able to be a part of this. But we're involved in a lot more than just, a board meeting once a month and going and visiting schools. We're involved in pretty much all of the chamber events. We're involved in all of the SESBA events, and that's not just the conferences. That's several meetings a quarter.
The advocacy.
That have what?
The advocacy.
The advocacy, yeah. I mean, the next conference that we're going to is in Aiken, and that's just for a night, just for not even overnight, just for a few hours, yeah. So it's not to mention, I take calls, texts, emails on the daily. I mean, we're on the phone, a lot. And so I couldn't imagine having to keep up with that. I mean, I didn't write any of that down, but when Kathy talked to me about what she had kept the record of, it really opened my eyes too. So that, and then I would just I know Chris mentioned it, but I think there's a couple board members on this current board that do work, a full-time 9-to-5 job that have to take paid time off in order to be a part of those kinds of things that are in the middle of the day. If you're not self-employed, like I am, or, stay-at-home mom or dad, then, you're taking time away from your job, and that's paid time off that you would normally take off to vacation with your family or because you're sick, to be a part of this board. And it really, in order to do a good job at being a board member, it really does require you to be at all of those different functions. So those are just my 2 cents. I agree with what's been said.
So last but not least, and I may or may not surprise you, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'll admit I've swung multiple ways. I don't like being put in a position where I have to vote on whether I get paid. That's just a really awkward and uncomfortable position. We're somewhat unique in the sense that we're one of the few elected positions that's nonpartisan. In some ways, we operate kind of like a nonprofit board, but not, because we're obviously more of a political board. I like to kind of benchmark against what are other folks doing, and I do see that there are other districts that are getting paid. I would argue that we do get payment today, and I think it's important for us to quantify that, because we do get paid, like was mentioned, for our largest costs, which are conferences and travel to conferences.
And that wasn't included in any of the
Correct.
numbers.
So I think it would be important to let's quantify what we already do get reimbursed for our memberships, for our conferences, all of the things. My general sense is that the majority of our costs are covered already. That's not to say all of them are, because they're not. I, like all of y'all, ran because I knew I was going to be giving something away and up, and that includes time, and it does include finances. So I think at the end of the day, it comes to me down to, is the decision that there is a message also attached to. And right now we're in a time where we're trying to focus on our teachers, and teacher salaries is a major concern for a lot. Retention is important. Finances is extremely important. We're really trying to dig into the details, and I'm not so sure that right now is the time to give our board additional dollars when all of these other competing messages are out there. So if we were to make a decision right now, I would say I'm not in favor of any additional funds to cover what we're doing. But I do think there's extra homework to be done in the sense of what is being paid for now and what additional payment are we looking for, and how does that look within our budget?
I agree with you, and I think my thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this would be, if this was even brought up again, then it would be a conversation that would happen with the next board.
What would typically happen is we would make ourselves, like if we voted now, it would two possible scenarios. We could vote now or in October to begin board compensation, for that compensation to start in January after it should always happen after an election.
Right.
We take the vote now, and then the election happens, and then compensation starts. Or a scenario that could exist is that the board authorizes in October, rather than compensation, authorizes the district, as they're preparing the 25-26 budget, to consider board reimbursements for actual expenses or compensation, and include that in that budget, but maybe with a release valve that only if staff gets a raise, then, and there's room in the budget for board reimbursement or compensation, then that's included in that budget. So then we would have voted in October for that, but then when the budget comes up in the spring, the new board will have the opportunity to take that out of the budget. So there's some accountability there, so that because you don't ever, as a board, I don't want as a board want to bind a future board to do something that they disagree with, and so that kind of gives you some room there to have two boards that are accountable for that vote.
Right. Yeah, so. And that's what I was getting at, was as long as it's that the next board can have a say, also, but then. As we talk about the salary schedule and the work that we're going to be doing coming up, that as long as the salaries are brought up for everyone before that, we're not trying to pay ourselves before anyone else gets a raise. Right. Yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah. I mean, the only other thing I would add is I guess I understand where you're coming from, Ms. Shealy, Ms. McCown, and like I said, you're never going to break even for where you are. That's not why you ran for office. What I will say, though, is if there was some kind of compensation as we start discussing it, I'd probably like it to be tied some kind of way to participation. So maybe like if you're at a meeting, now you unlock that key and qualify, but if you're not at the meeting, you don't. So, I mean.
And I think that is the way some of the boards do. It's per meeting. And, and just off the top of my head, I was thinking like $50, maybe $100 for officers, and that is way down the scale compared to what a lot of these districts pay. It's not a make or break. It honestly, either way, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to serve. Get paid or not, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
but I, like I said earlier, I still think now's the time to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm like you. I wouldn't change it. I mean, I ran for this office 3 times at my own expense. I mean, I ran for it 3 times for a reason. There was no compensation in 2018. There was no compensation in 2020. There was no compensation in 2022. But I kept running, and I got here. And so now I'm here to serve and to do the job. Now, if somebody decides they kind of want to compensate, that's great, but really, I'm here to serve. I'm not really here for that. But so I'm not going to sit there and argue with that. But I'm just saying, whether it's me or whether it's anybody else, I feel like I'm here for the right reason. I want us to have 7 people sitting on this board for the right reason that are prepared to serve.
And last thing I'll say, I know we have to move on, but Chris, you mentioned about attracting the wrong people. I would argue the opposite, that perhaps it would attract the people that we do want to attract to sit on the board that wouldn't otherwise be able to take that time because they work a 9 to 5 that doesn't allow them to take that kind of time off. But if they did take the time, then they would be compensated for that time. So,
all right. Thank you for the thorough and civil conversation about that. And this was just to get this conversation started. We just board think about it, and we can decide if we want to proceed with it in October or in the future. But I do think it was something that I don't know that this board has ever talked about it, or any board, Lexington 1 board has ever talked about it. And so I think it was time to at least put the conversation out and just think about it a little bit further. So, all right, thank you again. All right, moving on to action items. And this is Ms. Miller, and it is the 8% bond budget approval.
Yes.
And this says 60 minutes. You're not taking 60 minutes for this, are you?
No, not at all.
It says 60 minutes.
All right. Tonight we are presenting the proposed list of capital projects to be funded through the 8% bond issuance that was approved last month. The bond issuance has provided us with a total of $19,773,719 dedicated to fund various capital improvements. You have the list of projects. You can see they are organized by department. And then within each department, we have categorized the projects into 2 groups. We have the must-dos and the would-like-to-dos. The must-do projects, these are critical initiatives that address urgent needs and compliance requirements. You'll see the total budget is allocated for those projects. Then the would-like-to-do projects, these are desirable but not immediately critical. They represent opportunities for enhancements and improvement beyond the essential needs. And the amount of would-like-to-do items is approximately $8.5 million. This structured approach ensures that we addressed our most pressing needs first, while also planning for additional enhancements that align with our long-term goals. And if you have any questions, we're happy to take those at this time.
I just have a handful of questions. So under the must-dos, we list iPads for grades 3, 8, MacBooks for grades 9. Is that for next year? Don't these students already have these devices?
I'll offer some comments for that.
Thank you.
Sure. The way we have things structured right now with our refresh plans, we purchase iPads for grades 3, 6, and MacBooks for grade 9. So when we purchase an iPad for a middle school student in 6th grade, that student then keeps that iPad from grade 6 class, enters that grade. The refresh plan that we have in place right now, we try to purchase a new device for the time that a student has a device, and it's covered through a warranty. And so that warranty expires for iPads in 3 years. The warranty for MacBooks are for 4 years. And so that warranty expires at that time, and that's when the device becomes more expensive for us to keep and repair. So instead of doing that, we do try to sell those devices back to the community.
Thank you. Ms. Green.
I just remembered that I did not get a motion on the table. I was so shocked by the 60 minutes that I just forgot to get the motion on the table. So let's pause for a moment on the discussion and get a motion on the table. Do I hear a motion to approve the 8% bond budget and project list as presented by administration?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the 8% bond budget and project list as presented by administration.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. All right. Now we'll continue with discussion.
Okay, so, but the answer to that question is this money for purchasing them so we have them for next year?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I noticed on here, I know River Bluff got a refreshed turf field this summer, and that LHS is on this. We're moving all of our fields to turf fields? Is that the plan over the next 5 years?
Yes, ma'am. This project would be the second of the 5-year plan, and that would be to turf Lexington High School's field. And then the plan would then be to move forward subsequent years with White Knoll, then Gilbert, then Pillion.
And that is the desire of all of those districts? I mean, all those schools? I hear mixed feelings about it from...
I think a lot of people do love to play on grass, but it's a desired need.
Okay.
Because of the tremendous number of sports teams. When you look at one of our larger schools, I mean, you have really 5 football teams. When you take 2 middle schools that play on that field, you have at a lot of the schools 5 lacrosse teams. You've got soccer teams, boys and girls, kind of to that same number as well. So our fields, they take a tremendous amount of wear and tear. So it is a need to provide a safe, competitive playing surface.
Mm-hmm. And the youth sports, too? Mm-hmm. Dr. Postway? Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to ask Mr. Cooper if he would explain how the decision was made to move forward with this sequence of schools.
Yes, ma'am. Number of student athletes and number of teams. So that's the reason. Wish we could give everybody the same thing at the same time, but we went by numbers. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then what are BDA systems? I wrote this down, but I don't know where.
Sure. BDA stands for Bidirectional Amplification System, and so that is so when, if we had an event where emergency services are on our campus, they will be able to access and use their comms throughout the building. So I would call it in simple terms a repeater, so that they could access their audio equipment and communicate, but it's bidirectional amplification system.
Gotcha. And then and this doesn't have to be tonight, but out of curiosity, when I was looking at the list, everything was specified, the school locations except for fire alarm updates, signage updates, and playground updates. So I was just curious if we could get a list of what schools those are for.
Yes, ma'am, we can get you that.
Okay, I've got several questions. You said you had a handful. I got a page full. So first of all, I want to say this. Thank you I noticed in the public information we put out, we brought things into categories to kind of summarize things. I think that's really good for the public. I do appreciate you guys giving us a breakdown as far as a board of, hey, this is how this breaks down further. So I'm going to ask you some questions about the breakdown further. So
yes,
I think sometimes the public thinks all we see is the highlights and we just stamp it rather than digging into detail. So forgive me on that ahead in advance. You mentioned BDA systems, bidirectional amplification services. There's something next to that that says SDEG. What is that?
That's my own internal note. Okay. State Department of Education grant. Those were my initials that I would just put down there just as a really reminder to self. So Mr. Ellisor and team, along with Ms. Cook from Instruction, we participate and we have written a grant as part of that emergency safety grant. So we hope to be awarded some money from that. we had to kind of temper our excitement on what we might get because a big component of that award is poverty index. So there may be some other sites that are that state has to take care of before us. And those were items that we had included in there, the BDA systems, the security film, and security cameras.
One other item I saw is there was an item, upgrade 20% of computing devices for district and school staff in classified administrative positions. So we're doing 20%. So I guess the question I have about that is, should we expect that cost to be recurring over the next 4 years so that we eventually get 100% of those devices?
Yes, that's correct. It's more of a strategic approach to doing this. It would cost upwards of $1 million to likely refresh or replace all of our staff devices, and those are our front office staff, central services, administrators in schools. We focus on teachers in a different pot of money, but we tend to forget about other folks who use computers for just work in our central services area and the front office. And so what we're strategizing to do is take our older devices first and categorize it in that way. So refresh the older devices, and slowly we'll have everything refreshed. But keeping in mind, devices have about a 5 or 6 year lifespan. And so we'll have to keep doing that, but it's a better approach to upgrading technology than to ask for upwards of $1 million at once. We try to do it in phases in this way.
Okay. I noticed there's another line item, replace through-wall units and make necessary electrical controls upgrades at North Lake Community Learning Center. There's a pretty hefty price tag on that one, $1.93 million. HVAC and chillers. Is that for a particular wing? Is that for the entire building? Is that servicing a certain section? Or that's pretty hefty price tag. So what's that going towards?
Yes, sir. Those are through all units for the classrooms in the 300 and 400 halls. The 300 hall is where we house adult education, the family center, and also the Midlands Technology MTC classes. The 400 hall is where adult ed is expanding to. So you know from other projects, we've completed the roofs and are doing the rooftop units. Rooftop units, HVAC units serve the large areas like your cafeterias, your gyms, libraries, hallways. The through-wall units for the classrooms, the smaller areas. So that will be to finish that HVAC project and upgrade those air conditioning units in the classrooms.
Okay. That gives me a framework, because at work we're getting ready to do our whole HR building. It's somewhere in the 1 million range, so I feel good with that. Another line item we had on here was uplifting portables. It included Wi-Fi, cameras, PA systems, etc. And there was like $100,000 price tag. So $20,000 per portable. Is that 5 existing portables that we need to upfit, or is that
Yes, sir. If I could just kind of talk to,
Sure,
I'll talk to the portables, and Dr. Rivers may chime in as well.
Okay, sure.
We allocated, you see 2 different spots. You see $500,000 for portables. That is to be able to move portables and then install and upfit them at a new location should a school need a portable. So that's the construction cost to take it down, to move it, the architectural drawings, to get it set, replace the carpet, paint it, underpinning, all those things, the decking, the steps, and that as a rough estimate, it's about a $100,000 project if we have the portable. We have it at one school, and we're going to move it to another school. Okay. But along with that comes the technology side of things, and that's where you see Dr. Rivers' budget as well. And I believe his $100,000 is kind of what he would need to do his portion of what we would do if we had to move up to 5 portables within the district.
And so the technology typically includes a PA system, intercom system, and a portable, any kind of interactive panels, camera system that's installed, as well as Wi-Fi connecting that portable to the school. And so the additional technology, upfitting that portable with those things, is about $20,000, the technology side of things.
Okay.
So $20,000 times 5 portables.
Okay. So, Mr. Cooper, you were ahead of me because I was going to that $500,000 line item there. So you got both of them there. So the other thing I saw is we were going to replace 2 activity buses also. Just a question about that. Do we typically reap any kind of resale value, salvage value when we replace, a bus?
Yes, sir. When we replace the bus and we take one offline and bring a new one on, that offline bus would go to state surplus, and when it is sold, we do receive a portion of that sale, and that money goes into the general fund.
Okay. Let's see. I think my last question. You've done such a good job so far. There's would like to do projects. There was $8.4 million in would like to do. That's not included in the $19 million we're talking about now. There were some big ticket items on there like outdoor maintenance, turf, returf, security equipment, cameras, digital scoreboards, IT upgrades. I guess I may be getting ahead of ourselves, but were you all intending to ask the board to possibly consider that additional would like to do tonight, or were we pretty much talking about the $19 million of the must do tonight?
We're talking about the $19 million of must-dos, and I do want to add a clarification point on the surplus property. You do have to take into consideration where the original purchase was made from. If those buses perhaps were purchased with federal funding, that money would have to go back into that federal source, but otherwise it would go into the general fund if it wasn't specifically purchased with special revenue funds.
Okay, that's good. I was just, the reason I was asking about the $8.4 million for the would like to do is we didn't have a detailed list. I was going to say, if we don't have a detailed list of that, and we're going to talk to the board about that, we may want to table that part. But, the others that you've laid out, I think you've done a good job of kind of laying out the line items of what you're asking the board to consider. So that's all I've got.
I'll just chime in on 2 things. Personally, I am not for the iPads grade 3. I just really think we need to rethink this whole K through 3rd grade iPads. I just don't agree with it. That's probably a conversation for another day. But then I had a question about, I guess it was under the would like to do on the digital scoreboards. I was just curious if you had any more information, like was it for a particular school or?
Those would be to add digital scoreboards where we don't currently have them.
Good.
And yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? So this is a similar format to the 8% project list you brought us last year with the must-dos and would like to dos. Did we ever get to any of the would like to dos last year? Didn't you bring 1 or 2 of those to us later once things came in under budget? Isn't that?
I think there was a small one that we did move off of that, and I came to you and asked to use bond money for. Yes, ma'am.
So these are just the projects in waiting. Should these others either come in under budget or
we know would be things that we are planning on bringing to you next year.
Right. And but also last year some of the things that were on the would like to do either evaporated or became less of a priority or something else. There still would like to do, but there's no reason to think that those might actually move to a must-do anytime in the future.
Absolutely. There could be other projects that do rise very quickly to a must-do level that are not listed there. Just the nature of having all the mechanical systems and the facilities that we have to take care of.
Thank you. Anyone else?
iPads, then we could do all of the once.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to approve, and thank you for the detail and for the explanations. It's very helpful. We have a motion on the table to approve the 8% bond budget and the project list as presented by administration, the must-do project list as presented by administration. If there are no other questions, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries 6-1. All right. Do I hear a motion to approve the 5 additional procurement code exemptions as presented by administration?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the 5 additional procurement code exemptions as presented by administration.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. All right. Ms. Miller, would you like to talk us through this?
Yes, ma'am. This evening, we are requesting that the board approve 5 additional board exemptions to our district procurement code. The exemption is simply to exempt the competitive procurement part of the process. They would still be required to follow our district's policy and procedures. You're just exempting the competitive procurement part. These recommendations reflect an effort to ensure students, teachers, and schools receive the highest quality services in a timely manner at a reasonable cost. The items on the list are all services that have been proven difficult to obtain and or keep in some situations, and the items also reflect needs that require a response that's quick, efficient, and effective as soon as possible. The 5 items you have are ambulance services for district-approved events, security guard services, armed and unarmed, employment sourcing services for instructional staff identified as critical needs, maintenance contracts with a manufacturer or sole authorized dealer for existing building systems, and then lastly, critical custodial cleaning services. You do have the additional information that has been provided that has the rationale behind why those items are being brought forward. And again, by exempting these items from the competitive procurement process, the school board can prioritize the safety, well-being, and educational outcomes of students and staff. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those.
I'm very excited about the addition of ambulance services because I think I've sounded like a broken record with that one at our sporting events because I've witnessed too many very horrific things happen and our students having to lay on fields waiting for ambulances. So exciting for that one. Just clarifying, this does not mean, this is just procurement. This doesn't mean the security guards or the instructional staff, critical needs, they still have to go through like our HR stuff if it involves people and things like that. So this is just to procure them.
That's correct. You would still have contracts for your vendors. You would still follow all the employee requirements for HR items. It is just taking the competitive procurement part out.
Ms. Miller, just to be a little granular on this, under student services, bullet point H, employment sourcing services for instructional staff identified as critical needs, what would be a critical need in this particular case? Is this in a particular classroom or a particular specialty, or what would that be?
I think Mrs. Gaskins could give great examples on this one. I think it's going to really have a great impact on special education services, and I'll let Ms. Gaskins follow up with that.
So, for example, if we suddenly had a vacancy in a special education position and needed to use contracted services so that students could still receive their IEP services, we would need to do that without waiting for the full procurement process.
Okay, gotcha. The only other question I have is under property services, bullet point D. It says critical custodial cleaning services. Is that in particular asbestos, lead paint, or is that something totally different?
No, that is just for if there is a large amount of work that needs to be done quickly and we do not have the staff on hand that can meet the deadline of that, we have the option to get those services quickly without waiting for a competitive procurement process.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I also want to point out these exemptions cannot be used when we're spending federal dollars. These are just for our local and state dollars. With federal dollars, you are not allowed to use a local board exemption.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. All in favor of approving the 5 additional procurement code exemptions as presented by administration, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Do I hear a motion to allocate 2018 bond referendum funds for improvements to Rocky Creek Elementary School for HVAC building automation controls.
Madam Chair, I move to approve allocated 2018 bond referendum funds for improvements to Rocky Creek Elementary School for HVAC building automation controls.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. All right, Mr. Cooper.
Yes, ma'am. And that is what I am coming to you asking tonight is for approval to use 2018 bond funds to purchase some HVAC building automation controls for Rocky Creek. Specifically, it's controls for the B wing of Rocky Creek. Rocky Creek was included in the 2018 bond, but this is a new repair since it was written. So what we're asking the board to do is to use approximately $35,000 to $40,000 from the under budget closed project line item to update those HVAC controls at Rocky Creek.
Thank you. Board, any questions, Mr. Cooper?
So we're authorizing 35 to 40, or we authorizing 40? I guess do we authorize a range, or do we authorize an actual dollar amount?
That's the approximate. That's going to be the approximate amount. The controls are under a collective contract, and so we will get that quote and bid, and it will be. We expect it to be in that range, and that would be the amount that we would transfer from the under budget item to Rocky Creek to perform that repair.
So it's the under budget line item that we're pulling that out of?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You answered my question, because when I looked at Rocky Creek, I saw $15,000 line item. We spent $10,000. Then there was a $4,500 transferred out, and it was showed and it's closed. So it's kind of like, well, where are we going to move this money from?
Exactly. Yes, sir. So Rocky Creek was it's a 2010 build, so it was a fairly new school when that 2018 bond came around. So it had a very small amount allocated to it. Didn't need a whole lot, just $15,000 for I think some secured entry, a secured entry project. So that project came in under the 15, and so the balance that went to that under budget amount. So that's what we are using since we had cost savings there.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Any other questions? All right. All in favor of approving allocation of 2018 bond referendum funds for improvements to Rocky Creek Elementary School for HVAC building automation controls, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy JKE and JKER, expulsion of students?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve policy JKE and JKER, expulsion of students.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. All right, Mr. Cooper, you got all kinds of things all over the board tonight, so talk to us about this.
Some guys have all the luck. So we do bring to you tonight for second reading the updates to policy JKE and JKER. There are no changes since first reading. As a quick review, the changes that we made to the policy were due to an amendment to the state statute 5963-240, and it required districts to do two things. One is to inform the parent of the right to access of the expulsion investigative file 3 days prior to the hearing, and also for us to provide contact information for a legal aid services provider to determine eligibility as a part of our notifications. So you see those changes in both the policy and in the administrative rule. And we have been doing that since the beginning of the school year. So all our documents are updated, and we've been following this amendment and this new updated policy. Additionally, in the administrative rule, we took an opportunity to clarify and kind of streamline some language in the appeals process. There were some outdated job titles in there, so we eliminated those and just provided some more succinct description of that process. It does not change the process at all, but just remove titles that hadn't been used in a number of years.
I just have one question. In JKER, let's see, this is on page 3 under appeals, the first paragraph. We've said the decision of the district hearing officer may be appealed by the student or by the school administration to the director of student administration and ultimately to the board. Only thing I was wondering is we specifically kind of use titles of chief of student services, and we also have an executive director. So I guess I was wondering, is that just a language thing?
Yes, sir.
Should we phrase it to be what we actually use, or?
we thought it best to eliminate those job titles because sometimes they do change. I mean, I've been the director of student services, and then the next year I was the director of student administration, just because the title changed. The office was the same, and everything about it was, but just the name changed. So just not to have to stay, on top of those titles staying, the process itself, just we thought best to eliminate those specific titles. Our instructions, our procedures, our letters do direct very clearly the path that a parent or a school or a child would take in the appeal process. And so we just wanted to streamline that so we didn't have to bring back to the board, if a department's name changed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions, comments? All right. All in favor of approving policy JKE and JKER, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy JFABD, admission of homeless students?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy JFABD, admission of homeless students.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. Cooper?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We do bring policy JFABD to you tonight for second reading. There have been no changes since first reading. Quickly, this is in regard to the admission of homeless students. It's a model policy from the State School Boards Association and is in accordance with state, federal law, specifically the McKinney-Vento Act. This process was previously covered in our admission of resident and our admission of non-resident student policies, but it is a new policy from the state and a standalone policy, so we do bring it to you for approval tonight.
Thank you. Any questions, board? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy KEC, KECR, public concerns and complaints about instructional materials?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy KEC, KECR, public concerns and complaints about instructional materials.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mrs. Gaskins?
Earlier this evening, we talked about the selection of materials with the IJ policies. Instead, KEC and KECR deal with the reconsideration of existing materials if there are concerns or complaints. So you just revised this back in February, but since then, we needed to make additional revisions to be in compliance with the instructional materials regulation, State Board Regulation 43170. There have been no changes since first reading.
Thank you. Any questions? Comments, board? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Make sure I'm not skipping anything. Do I hear a motion to amend Administrative Rule IHAM-R to reflect the committee composition required by the South Carolina Comprehensive Health Education Act and South Carolina Code 593230?
Madam Chair, I move to amend Administrative Rule IHAM-R to reflect the committee composition required by the South Carolina Comprehensive Health Education Act and South Carolina Code 593230.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mrs. Gaskins?
So back in March, you passed this administrative rule to add more structure to how we select and implement our Comprehensive Health Education Advisory Committee. As we were beginning to implement this process for the first time, we realized that there was a Scrivener's error. While the composition of the committee was 13 total members as required by the Comprehensive Health Education Act, it should have been 3 clergy instead of 2. So this amendment just corrects that mistake.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve members of the Comprehensive Health Education Advisory Committee consistent with the requirements of the Comprehensive Health Education Act?
Madam Chair, I move to approve members of the Comprehensive Health Education Advisory Committee consistent with the requirements of the Comprehensive Health Education Act.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mrs. Gaskins?
Yes, outlined in the administrative rule we just discussed was the process for principals to nominate members for the Comprehensive Health Education Advisory Committee, working alongside their School Improvement Council chair, which they did. And a group of district administrators looked at those nominations and really tried to create a balanced slate to bring you tonight in terms of the required positions, as well as making sure we had representation from every school community.
Any questions?
Ms. Gaskins, just refresh my memory. When that committee meets, is that something that's public noticed or at all?
It is. It follows all FOIA requirements as a committee of the board.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy GBL, Comprehensive Education Program Implementation?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy JBL, Comprehensive Education Program Implementation.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Ms. Price, it's your turn.
All right, just a reminder, policy GBL is the Comprehensive Health Education Program Implementation. This just reflects the language of the South Carolina Code 593236, which is the law that went into effect on May 21st, 2024. So since it is already in effect, this just puts us in compliance with that.
Thank you. Any questions, board?
Yes, this is, just to emphasize what you said, this is not something our board came up with. This is state law, and we're just getting our policy in line with state law, correct?
That is correct. What you see there reflects exactly what is in the law.
All right, any other questions? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right. Do I hear a motion to approve policy BBBA, board member qualifications?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy BBBA, board member qualifications.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. All right. Were any changes received since first reading?
No, so we have 10B policies tonight, and for BBBA, there were no changes from the first, and this policy aligns with state law.
All right. Any questions, board? All right. All in favor of approving policy BBBA, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. All right. Do I hear a motion to approve policy BBBC, board member resignation?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy BBBC, board member resignation.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Any changes to this one?
Yes, this one has one change from first reading, and the board asked for the section where it's request for resignation to be changed from the board chair to a board member. May seek a vote of the board to authorize the board chair to request the voluntary resignation of a board member.
All right. Any questions or comments, board? All right. All in favor of policy BBBC, board member resignation, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy BBBD, board member removal from office?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy BBBD, board member removal from office.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Any discussion? Any changes?
There are no changes. This is a new model policy for us, and it aligns with South Carolina State Law 59/1960.
Thank you. Any conversation or questions? Anyone? All right. All in favor of policy BBBD, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy BBBE, unexpired term fulfillment vacancies?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve policy BBBE, unexpired term fulfillment vacancies.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Ms. Henson?
Yeah, again, no change from the first, and this basically just reflects that we consult Lexington County. The change reflects that we consult Lexington County Election Commission about the process.
All right. Any questions?
Yeah, we talked about this and that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, it's fine. I don't see any changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You good? All right. Anyone else? All right. All in favor of policy BBBE, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy BDH, board consultants?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy BDH, board consultants.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Ms. Henson?
This policy has no changes since the first reading.
All right. Any questions or comments, board? All
Yes,
right.
the only thing on that one, I mean, that allows us to utilize consultants, but when we use consultants, it'll come before the board anyway, correct? We don't necessarily have to have that in policy. I don't think so. I mean, I labored on this one a little bit, but I mean, I think if we decide that we're going to hire a consultant, the board is kind of charging folks to hire that consultant. we don't necessarily bring that back to the board just to approve that.
That's right.
Okay, I just make sure I'm clear. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All right. All in favor of policy BDH, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy BEDN, board members' use of district-owned portable devices?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy BEDN, board members' use of district-owned portable devices.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice.
Last time we did discuss what portable devices are and what that looks like for our board members, but at the end of the day, over the last month, there have been no changes suggested by any board members to this policy.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, board? All right. All right, hearing none, all in favor of policy BEDN, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy BIA-BIB, new member orientation, board member development opportunities?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy BIA-BIB, new member orientation, board member development opportunities.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mrs. Henson?
After discussion, there are no new recommendations for this policy for second reading.
All right. Any comments or questions, board? All right. All in favor of policy BIA-BIB, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy BIE, board member insurance liability?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy BIE, board member insurance liability.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Ms. Henson?
This is a new policy for our district, but not a new practice for our district. And since first reading, there have not been any suggestions for changes.
All right. Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Comments? All right. Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve policy BK, board membership and professional associations?
Madam Chair, I move to approve policy BK, board membership and professional associations.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice.
This policy basically addresses the South Carolina School Boards Association, that we would take an active part in it as the board deems appropriate. And so that's kind of left up to the current board at the time, but no changes have been suggested since first reading.
All right. Any questions or comments?
I think last time we talked about this, the question was asked how much we pay. Did we ever look into that, or does anyone know how much we pay every year?
Do you, Ms. Roof, know that answer?
I do.
Okay.
I actually got a question from a board candidate, so I have it ready to share in case it got asked tonight, and I have it to send to the board candidates. And I just had it right in front of me. It is approximately $50,000. That includes membership dues, policy services, our online policy maintenance, and a legal defense fund. That was for 24-25. Let me clarify that.
So the dues, policy services,
policy maintenance, online maintenance, that's the specific site that we have for our board policies.
Okay.
And legal defense fund. Thank you.
And that legal defense fund is different than SCISBIT?
Yes, it's actually, that is like $100 of the total amount.
That's only $100 of the $50,000.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
And that $50,000 is the dues for 7 people. And that does that or does it not include?
I don't know what the amount for the dues wasn't broken down.
Okay.
For whether that includes
it's a
district employees are also
it's not by a board member. So like it means
Thank
that
you, Ms. Green.
That Ms. Roof is part of the communications group, and Ms. Halliday is part of the administrative professionals group, and Dr. Postaway is part of the super. So it's the district as a whole.
Our district is a part of it. Okay. And does that, like Ms. Halliday, when you register us for conferences, that's an additional fee on top of the $50,000?
Some of them. Some of them are. Some are additional fees. Some with the usually the ones that are multiple days out of town, I believe, that are their conferences. Is that my
most-
remember?
I mean, most
but
of the stuff
but then the
is-
stuff like the regional meetings, there's no.
There's a fee for
is there
those
a fee
as
for that.
well.
Okay.
Yeah, but the fees for those includes the materials and the speakers and the. Yeah, it's the cost of those. Yeah, or like the facility fee for when they rent the conference rooms or the convention center and things like that.
Similar, if you're a member of a professional association and you attend their conference, you pay membership dues for being a member of the professional association. Like I'm a member of PRSA, for example, and if I attend a conference sponsored by PRSA, I usually have to pay conference cost, registration cost, etc.
And all districts are a part of SCSBA.
Ms. Ruth, thank you for
Yes, thank
for
you.
getting that number. I did not know that, but thank you for getting that. And I do. Let me just
I have to don't thank me. Thank Ms. Halliday.
Well, thank you, Ms.
Y'all
Halliday.
brought it up last time, and like I said, we also got a question from a candidate, so I had to track it down. I didn't have it off the top of my head or have access to it. So, but and Ms. Halliday was able to provide it. So I don't want to take credit for where the work was truly done.
I just want to take a point of privilege and also say the idea of taking questions from candidates and sharing them through one of our existing vehicles, Parent Square, so that all of them are educated. Kudos to you all for doing that. That would have been very, very helpful when I was running before, because I didn't want one candidate to know more than I knew or come to a forum and know more than I knew. I wanted to be prepared. So you're kind of helping to keep a level playing field by sharing that information with everyone all at once. So I appreciate that.
I'm about to hit send on a one email tonight. So,
well, and to bring it back to the School Board Association membership fee, like the policy services, the policies. When you go to our Lexington One website and you access board policies, those actually live on the SESBA site, and they maintain. We send our policy updates to them, and they upload them onto their site. So that's a pretty robust system, and so that's.
And I will point out that you can go on that system and you can pull up all the other boards in the state or even in other states, I think.
And it's extremely helpful sometimes when you're doing policy research and we've got something that's before us to just go out and see especially what other like districts like us, like I'll always look at Fort Mill and Richland too, and some districts that are the same size and same sort of composition, because just to see how they handle certain policies is extremely helpful. So okay. Any other questions or comments about policy BGA? All right. All in favor of, BK. All in favor of approval of policy BK, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And the motion carries. All right. Last one. Do I hear a motion to approve the removal of BGA memberships and school board associations as this is incorporated in policy BK?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the removal of policy BGA memberships in school board associations as this is incorporated in policy BK.
Thank you, Mrs. Henson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. And this is just duplicative of the one that we just approved and obsolete now. So any questions or comments? No? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. All right. Does anyone have anything else before we move to items for board information? No?
This can wait to board information. I just wanted to, as we conclude this part of the agenda, thank the board for working through all of these policies. And as we think back to Dr. Phillips' report, make sure that all of us thank a teacher for the support that they provided to students to produce those kinds of results. We have American Education Week coming up, but our thanks should not wait until then. So thanks for giving me a moment of privilege.
Absolutely. All right. Board, items for board information. You have received the following information: the monthly general fund financial report, the monthly general fund budget transfers report, the monthly capital projects report, the monthly unauthorized procurements report, and the quarterly grants report. While I'm thinking about it, maybe in one of our upcoming board briefs, in maybe Ms. Miller's section, we could just have a definition of what each of these reports is, just so folks can know, not the data, but just a definition of what this report is telling us. I think that might be a helpful thing for us and all the folks that like to read the board brief because it's so informative. I just think that might be helpful. So,
and in August, there were only 18 unauthorized procurements. And Ms. Miller, I don't have it in front of me, but when you first came here, approximately how many unauthorized did we have a month before you put in place some other?
Like 50, 40, 50, 60. Yeah.
Okay, so it's significantly decreased with new protocols and procedures we have in place. So
good job.
Good job.
Yeah.
That's often things just like you're missing a signature.
Yes. Right. Yes.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. The big stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, a couple other quick things. At the October 22nd board meeting, our next regular board meeting, the board will ratify our delegates for the South Carolina School Board Association Delegate Assembly, which will be held on December 7th, 2024, in conjunction with the SESBA Legislative and Advocacy Conference. Board, be sure to let Ms. Halliday know if you're planning to attend that conference and plan to be a delegate. And the way it works is we actually, Lexington won, but delegates are assigned by the size of the district, the number of students, and Lexington 1 actually has 9 delegates. And so after the election, the newly elected board members hopefully will plan to attend that conference and will also serve as delegates. So when we certify our delegates in October, we will have some placeholders for whomever is elected in November to serve as delegates.
I think Ms. Halliday's actually already reached out to the candidates to see if they would be willing to attend if they are elected.
So, but just when we vote on that, there'll be placeholders so that those folks can serve. And then just the way that works is the board will in November consider the legislative policies for that conference and vote on the board's approval of those. And then the 9 delegates then vote according to the wish of the board. So if the board approves it, then those 9 delegates, they don't vote individually. They vote on behalf of the board. So,
right.
So that's just how that works. Okay. And I would just like to take a minute to congratulate Dr. Price on his becoming Dr. Price. Congratulations. Well done.
Good job on your defense.
As we mentioned earlier, our next meeting is actually October 8th, and that is our board self-assessment and also the superintendent's evaluation. So the format's usually a little different. We may not sit up here. We may be sitting out there. But, of course, that meeting is open, and anybody's welcome to attend. And then our next regular meeting is on October 22nd. Can you believe it's almost October already? Oh, my goodness. It's just crazy. So if there's no other comments, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, I'd like to take point of privilege before we adjourn. We have a retired assistant principal from the district, Robbie Hunter, who had a catastrophic medical emergency yesterday, and I'm asking for your thoughts and prayers to be with Robbie tonight. With that, I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Second to adjourn?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. All in favor? Please have a good evening. Thank you very much.